Look at that. Here we are. A couple of guys. Why don't you tell everybody what we did this evening?
Just a couple guys with a dream.
Why don't you tell everybody what we did this evening? We had kind of a special evening, an impromptu business dinner.
We watched movie fights together with Max Landis.
No, we didn't. Was he on?
Yeah. He did really well, too. It is so striking how much he looks identical to my childhood best friend. It's just nuts how similar they look. Shout out Reed Cottle.
You like that?
Yeah. So, anyway, I woke up from my nap and Jay recorded a music episode that
we'll never see the light of day.
Yeah.
There will be a music episode, but there will not be... Listen,
well, they will have already known because this comes out on Monday.
Right.
But
I mean, my plan as of right now, there's no way I'm doing an hour. There's no way. It will not be the standard. Yeah. I will give people the release rundown, and I will do it very annoyingly.
Yeah. But I mean, you got plenty of stuff to talk about with that, though.
Oh, 100%. 100.
You have a busy weekend ahead of you.
Oh, my God. Yeah, you being here right now is preventing our YouTube subscribers going up.
I would love to have the opportunity you have this weekend.
Yeah,
I would love to make a Kingsman video. Probably not going to get to.
Why is that?
Because I work all weekend.
Gotcha.
I've got to turn and burn. I close tomorrow night, and then I got to open on Sunday, and so that blows ass. But maybe I'll throw something up on Monday. But anyway, that's not what you assigned me. My assignment was to go over what we did tonight. So I came over. We had a nice dinner together, a nice steak dinner at this place. I've never heard you mention this place.
Yeah.
After all the time we repeatedly go to the Chinese place and repeatedly go to taco place and repeatedly go to the Bojangles, and you have never once mentioned this place.
There's a limited number of places left to go.
I mean, maybe we haven't been to the Taco Bell together.
I mean, in terms of actual restaurants that don't serve you cardboard, but
Taco Bell isn't cardboard.
Yeah,
it's the healthiest fast food option.
I don't think I agree with that.
Huh?
I don't think I agree with that.
Well, it's a fact.
Fast food option, period. I used to have that book, Eat This, Not That, and they said that.
Yeah, but that's outdated. I'm talking about a study that came out last year. Suck it. So, where were we? Tonight, yes, a couple hours ago, we had a nice steak dinner. We had a great business conversation. We talked about so many things inside and outside of podcasting. You told me about a TV show idea.
I gave you a spec script. I pitched a TV.
I love the fact that you were like, I'm just going to hand this over to you because I'm not going to write it.
Well, I've toyed around with the idea of writing as blog posts, just scenes. So actually, this is an interesting conversation. I've known many people who are really good writers, you included, from what I've heard. I'm assuming that you're a good writer, who just don't fucking do it. And it drives me crazy.
Writing is so hard.
If I have a skill at doing something, I try to do it. Or I try to figure out a way to, even if it's just for me personally. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's design work that I do that nobody really sees. And it's not because I'm self-conscious about it or anything like that. I just don't really put it out there.
Right.
It's just a decision. I used to toy. So back in the day, long time ago, long time ago, one of the ways that a lot of books would come out, before books would come out, popular authors, Stephen King did this, I believe. Who else did this? C.S. Lewis, maybe? And what's the guy? I'm forgetting his name. F. Scott Fitzgerald and the guy that wrote Catcher in the Rye. What's his name?
Salinger.
J.D. Salinger. They would write little snippets of stories that would end up becoming books. They would put them in journals, magazines, newspapers, and whatnot. The Gunslinger from Stephen King, what people would like wait for that to come out. There used to be old stories. People would wait at boat docks for newspapers to come in, so that they could read those stories. Why aren't people doing stuff like that on blog posts? Like, I've always wondered why you wouldn't utilize something like a Tumblr to act as like a living book or a living story that people would continuously come to. And I've always thought about.
I think that some people do that.
I'm sure that people do.
There was this great website.
I wish more people would do it.
There was this interesting website where people could just write out short stories and popcorn fiction, I think is what it was called. It was really cool. I don't know if it's still around anymore. I used to check it out when I was doing a lot more screenwriting. To go back to your question, Jay, to make you feel better, because you did give me this project. In high school, there were two. Did you do portfolios?
Well, of course.
So you had portfolio pieces like senior year or whatever. So there was that, and then when I was in high school, or when I was a senior, I don't know.
Are you not sweltering in that sweatshirt there right now?
You have a great house to wear a sweatshirt, even though it was 90 degrees today.
Yeah.
You have a great house to wear a sweatshirt in because it's so cold all the time. So the two, whatever you call those things, there were two tests. One was called an on-demand test, and the other being the portfolio. I was one of 13 people in my class that got a distinguished on both.
Oh, good for you.
And I went to Kings Island.
Good for you.
And then the bus got a flat tire, and Ryan Ucci had to book it to Kings Island to pick me up and take me back to a show.
Interesting. Look, I've always, what I was essentially saying about that whole thing is I've always toyed around. So I told you about some individual. I told you about the overall plot.
Yeah.
I told you about some individual scenes. I'd always toyed around with writing the individual scenes because you could break away from something like that I told you about, individual vignettes.
Yes.
And assemble it together some other way.
Definitely.
But anyways, we did that. We had a nice steak dinner. We talked some shit about Collider. No, we didn't. Did we? Maybe we did.
We always, I don't mean that in a negative connotation. We're always we're always shooting the shit about Collider.
Anytime you're talking shit.
You're talking about shit with Collider.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't want people to take that wrongly.
And then we went to Kroger. Tell them what we did at Kroger.
Well, I got a highball, the energy version of the Croix.
Right.
For all of our LaCroix
Except
fans.
that one has sugar in it, I believe.
Oh, my God. It does. Organic sugar. Mother of God. Anyway, so should have gotten that coffee. We went over to the clothing section after you've, heightened this bad boy up ever since you got that flannel, your favorite flannel.
It is my favorite.
And we went over there, and I'll tell you what.
I got a nice selection.
It was everything you made it out to be.
Yeah.
Spent a lot more time over there.
As fuck.
Than I thought. Walked away with a baseball tee that doesn't really fit. No, I'll have to return it. That's going to be weird returning something to Kroger. Never done that before. But I got this fly sweatshirt, which I love, crew neck sweatshirts.
# fly as fuck.
And I think the most interesting takeaway is the fact that I am wearing a Carhartt hat.
That's right.
Like a cap. And I have never, ever worn any other type of hat other than a flat bill.
Right.
Because my head is so big and weird. Just looks weird in any other type of hat.
It looks fantastic on you.
Thank you. And I'm baffled.
Yeah.
I have no idea where this type of hat has been all my life.
Well,
by the way, I need to make sure that everyone knows that you also got this hat in a different style or different color, and we are both wearing them right now to podcast.
That's right. So, just for like a little bit of education, Carhartt growing up was sort of like, it was like that and Wranglers were the brands that rednecks in our high school, shout out Ralph Lenardic, rednecks in our high school would wear around. And it was sort of like one of those, it was just a redneck brand. And all of a sudden, in the last, I don't know, couple of years, Carhartt has been taken by the streetwear culture. And this is not a joke. Like, I'm a massive fan of Kanye West, but legitimately anything he wears instantly becomes a thing. Champion used to be a brand that you would wear as shorts if you played flag football. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Champion was nothing. And all of a sudden...
It was a Walmart brand.
Yeah, now all of a sudden Champion are doing collaborations with Supreme, which Supreme shirts go for over T-shirts go for over $1,000. I mean...
Fuck them.
It's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. And yeah, Carhartt is a part of that. I mean, you'll see Kanye West rocking a Carhartt crew neck.
And to be fair, Carhartt also appeals to outdoorsmen. people wear hunting and things
100%.
like that. Like,
Yeah, rednecks.
I don't think you're
I'm
not a
joking.
redneck if you like to hunt
There's
necessarily.
plenty of hipsters that love to hunt
Right.
with like old rifles.
Our friend Kevin.
Oh yeah, Kevin Booth.
Yeah. When he goes hunting, he wears Carhartts, and then when he's not, he looks like he's in a frat.
Yeah.
I'm like, who are you?
Don't ever make fun of his baby brother. It'd be a terrible thing to do.
Can we talk about that even though no one cares?
We can, yeah.
Because I would like to take the moment to
I
reminisce.
feel like we have, but that's fine. We can talk about it.
I want to talk about him because he's been missing from our lives.
All of our friends have been missing from our lives.
Is it our fault or is it their fault?
It's not our fault. We didn't get married.
That's good. We've been hanging out.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey.
We haven't been doing shit. All we do is podcast. That's it. We've stayed in the same spot. Cody's moving to Mount St. Helens or wherever he lives.
Cody could have easily been at Kroger with us tonight.
100%.
He texted me today. Cody Rayhacker texted me today.
It's not the fact that Cody texts you that bothers me. It's the fact that he has the ability to carry on conversations. And for one reason or another, he elects not to.
He only feels the need to either tweet at me or something when I'm being insulted by someone else. Like, he is supportive of anyone who's calling me out on anything. He loves that. And he also likes to just shove Kumail Nanjiani in my face. So he was the first one to tweet at me because he's going to be hosting SNL in a couple weeks.
Who, Cody?
Yeah.
Cody Rayhacker?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw the announcement was Ryan Gosling, Gal Gadot, and Kumail Nanjiani. And he had tagged Kumail Nanjiani, so I couldn't respond, but I just wanted to be like, one of these things doesn't belong.
Yeah, so for additional context to our listeners, Cody Rayhacker was introduced into my life via you and instantly became a spirit animal of mine. And, you know,
sometimes I think you'd prefer to do this with Cody than me.
I do dream of a day when Cody is like a regular on all after parties. Or just tell him he's good at podcasting.
Yeah. He gets in his head a little bit, but he's good.
The episode of Never Before Seen that we did with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done in my entire life.
I was thinking about doing this. I think that
digging up old stuff
that we did absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think going back to our Film Beef episodes with you on them, I think I might put up on the feed if you don't mind.
When we get the Patreon launched on our bonus feed, I'm actually planning on re-releasing every single Creative Control we've done.
Oh, really?
100%.
Cool. So
you can hear the struggle of Ryan Snelling prior to Sight and Sound. Those are good episodes.
Thanks.
I mean, I was part of them too.
I don't remember. Am I just talking shit about Film Beef?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? You don't remember?
Oh, what? You mean on those? No,
on
no.
Episodes.
So on those episodes,
I talked about Schmoville a little bit.
It was a lot. It was actually a lot of stuff with your relationship with the Schmoes and Collider, and a lot of stuff with film. It wasn't a lot of talking shit.
Okay.
It really wasn't. And just in general, the struggle of trying to be a successful podcaster.
Are you going to release the episode you did with Phil?
Well, yeah. I'd release every single one that I've ever done.
Did you do one with Cody?
Not with Cody. No, never got to. Did
so
one with Sam Marcoux. I did one with Michael. I did one with I think I tried to do one with Grim Green and it didn't happen.
So anyway, the names that were thrown out, like Cody and Kevin, these are all people that we podcasted with on Film Beef and Death to DVR. They were in our podcasting circle pretty much right up until Sight and Sound started. But anyway, Kevin, what was I going to say about Kevin?
I don't know. We were talking about hunting.
We were talking about his baby brother and.
Oh, you were going to tell the baby brother story.
Yeah. So he just posted one day, like just a one day magically, he had a baby brother. And he was like 19 or 20, maybe a little bit older when this happened. And that's not a normal thing. I was just fascinated that it came as such a shock because
the way that our friends group worked too at that time is like everybody was fair game for joking about absurdity in general.
And yes, from any friends group I've been a part of.
Like, for
It's
instance,
all
Phil
about-
went to a Bruno Mars concert the other day, and I was like, oh, we're doing this now? It was just like, where did this come from? Why are you laughing so hard about that? What's funny about that? Because you had the same take?
Because we haven't discussed that at all.
Right.
And that was my exact thought. Anyway.
Can I tell you one other side story? I've thought about this the other day. If my best friend, John Ransdell, could be the
Your
Finstock
best friend, huh?
of Sight and Sound. And then I thought in my head, what would a conversation between Finstock and John Ransdell sound like? And John would immediately just say, would you speak up? I can't fucking hear you. Like, I'm sorry,
Okay,
go
I'm
ahead.
already off the Kevin thing. Here's
Okay.
what I want to discuss.
We made fun of his baby brother.
This story is so good, though. I'll tell it real quick.
It's
So
so-
anyway, I was so fascinated by this, and that and the combination of we make fun of our friends for literally anything, even if it doesn't constitute being made fun of, and just like post after post, he'd post pictures of him and his little brother on Instagram, and I would just reply like LMAO, or I would screenshot it and put it in our group text, like having that attitude of, oh, this is the thing now.
This is also a guy who just like wouldn't participate in the group for a long period of time, which is a part of the hilariosity of
So
this whole thing.
eventually, he just got fucking fed up that I was doing this, and just came at me. And you
The
could
first time
probably
we had
tell-
heard from him
yes,
for probably months.
and remind me how he did it.
Just out of nowhere, I think we were in the middle of another conversation. He just dips in and says, fuck anybody who talks shit about my baby brother.
And it was a massive, like, he freaked out.
I think
All
I pulled
because-
off of that text message and texted you directly and just like,
But it was the way he
The
worded
hell?
it. It was the way he worded it. Exactly like, fuck anyone who talks shit about my brother. It's like, that's not what
No
we're
one would-
doing. We're not talking shit about some embryo you have. Like,
right, yeah.
it's so absurd.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to talk about Collider.
Okay, then I have a story after.
And
tell.
Schmoes know for a second. And I'm mainly speaking to the people that listen to Sight and Sound that I have no idea what Collider and Schmoes know is. Because you just threw out the name Finstock, and I realized
Right.
that so many people have no idea who that is. And
A lot of people do, but yeah.
but a lot of people don't.
Right. of
Brando,
course.
Cassidy, Eric, Ross Cassidy, to be specific. So,
Like how you just came up with, like today I'm deciding to call him by his
well,
last
I
name.
added him on Facebook, so now I can do that.
Oh, there you go.
So I realized that I kind of get annoyed when my personal friends don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about Collider and Schmoes now. Like, I'm a little bit over like I mentioned the Schmodown to my friend Goodman the other day, and he just responded, yeah, whatever you're talking about. Like, he had no idea, and I'm like, I think that's am I in the right?
I had an interaction like this. I was taking a piss in the bathroom at work today, maybe it was yesterday. And there's people that know I podcast, and that's like something I'm heavily involved in. And me and another guy were washing our hands at the same time, and he just came up and said, "So how's podcasting going?" And I'm just like, "What? What? How do you respond to that?" I was just like,
How was that at all what I was talking about?
because I hate those interactions. I don't want to talk to people.
That's not the point I'm making.
What is? It is. You
No.
said things. You said you get annoyed when people aren't understanding of the things that you're involved in.
I'm annoyed that it's been so long that I've been a part of this, and they still have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right. Well, where do you begin to explain something like that? Is the point? Like, where do you begin? Well, actually, a Finstock is this, and then you go over the entire. Like, how could you just explain that to somebody?
Because I've talked to them about it before.
But they don't pay attention.
Like when they've asked, "Hey, so what do you do now?" and I explain what it is. Like, I've had that conversation
Right.
with all of my friends, and some of them get it, and some of them don't. And it's
At what level do they tune out? Like,
I don't know.
What level in the story?
and it's funny because I've even worked on my pitch, if you will.
Okay.
Like I've decided
It's a
that
good move.
anytime I've attempted to explain Collider and Schmoes Know, I think about it from their entry point. Like, does this person watch YouTube? I'm going to tell them that Schmoes Know is a YouTube they review movies on
Right.
YouTube. Or if they listen to podcasts, I'll say they do podcasts. And I don't do all the add-on stuff. Like, I don't go, they do podcasts and they do a YouTube show, then they do a live show. Like,
Right.
I don't add the extra stuff unless they're willing to listen. So you just got to think of it that way. But
I've learned here recently, to me, one of the biggest names that you could drop is the fact that they're owned by Complex. That's a big deal. But to a lot of people,
the same people don't know what Complex
exactly.
is.
And that I've stopped using that now, but that's a very
Jaye Williams thing.
Even that's baffling to me. I'm like, you should know what Complex is.
If someone's a fan of Screen Junkies, I know they've seen Honest Trailers or maybe know movie fights, then the entry point is probably the Schmodown.
Excuse me. I do throw out the ESPN or the Sports Center of movies a lot. So just so people can understand exactly what it is, or the Howard Stern of movie shows or something like that.
One of my friends, like when I first started doing this, someone who actually likes movies and watches things on YouTube, he liked Flick Pick, and so like he was already involved in that space. And then I sent him the Schmoes No channel and the Collider video channel, and like a week later, I asked him like if he was enjoying it, and he just responded something along the lines of he didn't understand what it was. And I'm like, what the hell videos did you come across? Like, how did
some people are still not like invested or understand exactly what YouTube is and how it works and how it can be beneficial for your own entertainment.
People make it harder than it actually is.
100%.
And you know why? It's because I was talking to my mom and my mom's boyfriend about, we were talking about TVs, and he was talking about
Breaking Bad.
He was talking about he was talking about cutting the cord, and he's gonna have to get Netflix, but he doesn't even know like what it is and where to begin.
Yeah.
And there was one time when I pulled up Netflix on the smart TV in our living room to watch something with my mom, and he was just like, "Wait, how you doing?
What is that?
How are you doing that?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, the only reason why I'm saying that he's thinking too hard, huh?
That hat looks great on you.
The only reason why I'm baffled by his approach is because the way I remotely brought up Netflix on a smart TV is the way that he remotely pulls up anything on his smartphone.
Right.
It's just like, look, this is connected to the internet. There's an app. You open it. And then whatever that app is capable of doing, you do it. I mean, it's like he's thinking.
Just try anything.
He's thinking way too hard about it. It's like,
just push some buttons.
I pulled up Netflix on this TV the exact same way you'd pull up Facebook on your phone. The exact same.
Yeah, and then you
could complicate it by like explaining like, okay, well, an Amazon Fire does this, but it's like it's in that particular instance, it was as easy as that.
On the flip side of all that, then you have people who are like surprise you to how much knowledge they actually do have about something like that. Like Mitchell, for instance, who is, I mean, he goes really far back with Collider stuff and Schmoes stuff too. And it's just kind of funny to stumble upon people like that as well. I don't know. It's weird. The dynamic in general is weird. Can I tell you a story about spiders?
Yeah, because I've got one as well. Go ahead.
Okay. So I tweeted this, but it's like this weird time of the year. Fall is upon us, and
today's the first day of fall.
Allegedly, it's 90 fucking degrees outside. What? You got something to say?
You know what today is?
Your birthday.
It is the 13th anniversary of the crash of Oceanic 815.
Oh, yeah? 9/22? Oh, okay, cool. Anyways, so this is like I tweeted about this, but this is like the final push for spiders before it just gets too cold for them to hang out. And so every year for the past 4 years, there is, I'm not going to say one spider, but there is one specific species of spider that is always in the exact same spot every single year.
Oh, no.
In my house. Not in my house, outside of my house. So when I walk out my door and I turn left, there's my driveway, and then on the side of the house, so the 90-degree angle where the garage meets the side of the house is where my garbage can is outside.
Yeah.
And right above that, there, like 4 years ago, there was a spider out there, a big motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like had some like reddish, blackish legs, but then had a brown big ass on it. It wasn't a brown recluse. I know what they look like. But anyways, so this 4 years ago, I tried to swat it down and it just fell in the grass and disappeared. So I knew to look for it. Next year, come back, see the motherfucker again. This time I'm prepared and I actually smash it.
Yeah.
Third year, last year, come outside, it's there again. Not that same one, like its child, back for revenge. And I spray it with some spray.
Yeah.
Kill it. But because it had been a recurring thing, all year, this year, I've been looking for it and waiting for it and preparing for it. I always go outside. I always walk over there and I look up to search for it before I do anything. So this morning, I walk out my door. I'm about to leave, and it's Friday when we're recording this, so it's trash day. I have to bring my trash can around. So I walk over there, and I'm looking up, and something was telling me to look other places as well. So I look down, and you know how from a distance you can't always see spiders because they're floating in an invisible web?
Yeah.
I am like 5 inches from this motherfucker right in front of my chest. And I look down, and he's a big son of a bitch. He had made a web from the top of my roof down to Kayla's car and was just floating there waiting for me.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, you bastard. So I come inside. I get my spider spray, which I don't know if you've ever used a spider spray before, but the new ones are dope. You put batteries in them. They have a motor in them. You can stand like 15 feet away from wherever you want to shoot it and shoot it like a fucking laser. It's amazing. So I stand outside and I'm pumping this thing and it kind of freaks out. It gets hit with it. It freaks out and it like escapes. It doesn't die immediately. It escapes up into a corner and it's just there somewhere. It might have died there or it could still be alive. And that's fine. I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem. I know spiders exist outside. I know spiders exist in this house. I don't mind if they exist. I don't mind living
amongst the spiders.
Amongst them. I just don't want to live with them. Does that make sense? I don't want them to bother me.
Yeah.
Don't come out. Don't hang somewhere where I can see you. Just
I don't think
somewhere
there's
else.
a person on the planet that would contest that.
I don't know if people know this or not.
Who's embracing the spiders here?
I am legitimately scared of spiders. Like I have arachnophobia.
I'm not afraid of it, but I mean, like you said, I don't want to get bitten. I don't want to see them. They don't freak me out. I don't scream. I'm not afraid to kill them like girls on Twitter are. But
the statistics are in our favor. Well, first of all, we're just way bigger than them. We have many more tools to destroy them. And the statistics of venomous ones to not venomous ones are pretty in our favor. Like
there's like 2 venomous spiders.
Yeah, I just don't like. But the ones that are venomous around here, they're fucking ridiculous. You got the black widow, hurts like a bitch to get bit by one. Some people will die, children and old people, which who needs them anyways. Then you have the brown recluse, which will literally rot your skin off.
I think Sturgill got bit by a brown recluse.
Then you have the spider that will bite you. Is the banana spider in Brazil that'll just give you a rock hard boner and you die because all the blood rushes to your dick. That's a real thing.
So one night I go outside. I got this. My porch light is so fucking bright. It lights up the entire street. Have you seen it?
Never turn the lights on outside.
Have you seen my street light when it's on?
No.
It's a bright white CFL bulb and it just lights up the entire street. It's hilarious. I have to turn it off when I go to bed, or otherwise I can't sleep because it's so bright coming in my window. So I went out there to take out the trash and I'm looking, and so I have my garage and like the way the awning lays on my garage, and then it cuts into my front door, and then the rest of the front of the house, right? I'm looking, and like every 2 feet is the largest spider I've ever seen.
Right.
Like I'm talking about my roof. that's like maybe 15 feet high. I don't have great vision. I'm looking up. I can see the biggest spider I've ever seen every 2 feet,
It's
lighting
nuts.
my entire house. And it was horrifying. So when the air conditioning is off in the house, we open up every window, but I wasn't opening my window because there was a spider that just lived and hung dead center in the middle of my bedroom window. And it's funny because
On the outside.
on the outside. And I opened my window
I will never come over there again.
I opened my window for a second to observe my screen. I saw a little hole in it. I said, yeah, there's no way I'm keeping my window open.
Yeah.
So one night I went out there to kill it, finally, because I was tired of this, living in fear. And it was so big. I took several napkins. I had to jump.
I can't do that either.
I had to jump because,
I can't do the napkins. I can't touch them.
I took like a big thing of napkins. Like that way
Yeah.
I couldn't even feel it. Like
show me size of like in your hand. Like
It was-
the size of your thumb?
probably the size of like my fingertip. Like,
Okay.
From that first crease up.
Pretty big.
It's huge. And so I had to jump up and grab it because, again, it was like 15 feet up in the air. I leapt up and slammed it. The spider was so big that all of the napkins stuck to my window like glue.
Yeah.
None of them fell. It was just like the spider was so big it was glue for the napkins.
Right.
Whereas
That's
if you
ridiculous.
remove your hand, it would just fall. And I left it there for several minutes, and it was hilarious to me.
So-
I just had napkins stuck to my window.
So just to illustrate the point, and I'll close with my the worst spider story I've ever had in my life. I'm so afraid of them. This was years ago, once saw a spider in this room, which you know how much time I spent in this room. Tried to kill it, didn't kill it, escaped, didn't go in this room for 2 days. Refused. That's how bad it is. The most terrifying spider story ever. One of the reasons you're weary of those night lights because the bugs, they fly around there and they build their webs around there to catch them so that the spiders eat them. The one that's outside of my house, I was aware of this, and I do this still to this day. Anytime I go out that door, I open it and I look up just to see, and then I open and leave my house. One day I did this, and I looked up, didn't see anything, and I walked out, and I saw something in my peripheral. What the fuck is that? And I turned back, and dude, biggest spider I've ever seen, freaking out because I obviously hit its web. And dude, it was so close to my face. Do you know the horror of a spider actually falling on your face?
Yeah, it
Fuck
sucks.
you. No.
It sucks.
God.
So how come, why don't people, if everyone's afraid of spiders.
See that box beside you, by the way? There's a box behind this couch.
Yeah.
I looked up on Amazon best spider spray. That's what's in that big ass box over there.
Why don't people just prepare for that? Like every year in May, why don't they spray their entire perimeter?
I had that. It was called a roommate, and he left.
Okay.
So I didn't do that.
Very good.
But that's why I've got that spray now.
So let's talk about what the hell we're doing here.
Let's do it.
So you may have noticed by the title, this isn't a traditional Sight and Sound Weekly. We talked about it, and we promised that for our birthday, we're going to talk about our top fives. Top 5 albums, movies.
Yeah.
What's the other one? TV shows.
Right.
And that's what we're here for. And I'm pretty excited. I hope you guys are excited. You're going to learn a little bit more about Ryan Snelling and Jaye Williams. And yeah, we're just going to go back and forth.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to us, Jay.
Happy birthday to us. It's crazy. It's crazy what's happened in a year. Is Sight and Sound the biggest thing? No. Is it as big as other podcasts have been in a year? No. But
it's bigger than anything we've done.
it's bigger than anything we've done. And I am so proud and happy of the things that we have established. If you would have told me a year ago, as hopeful as I was, that we would have a Facebook group with 100 and
It's like 25 now.
yeah, 100 almost 130 members, I would have said you're fucking crazy. If you my goal when we started YouTube was to get to 1,000, but even looking at approaching 750, that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
So, and just to have all this other stuff established, like being on After Schmo, stuff with TV Time, all that stuff is just, it's crazy. I love it.
You're welcome.
You're welcome to me. Welcome to me.
Yeah.
You're welcome for taking you away from Film Beef.
Anyway, are we doing music first?
Do you want to do music first?
Sure. You're the one that said it pre-show.
Should we like flip for it or something?
I don't know. Why do you want that to be the end?
Okay, I've got this. Hang on.
Do you have a coin toss app?
No. I've numbered each segment. Pick a number.
Are you ready right now?
Yeah.
My number is always 2. So let's go 2, 3, 1.
You go 2, 3, 1?
Yeah.
So that would be movies, music, TV. I'm sorry, movies. Yeah, movies, music, TV. So movies are up first.
Yeah. Okay, so you want me to start my list off at number 5?
Yeah, I mean, I guess would it be worth it to do it top 10 style, like with punting and whatnot? I mean, I guess it would be if it's going to happen.
Yeah, we can include punting, but I think we can just go back and forth with the order since we only have 5. I guess let's just talk about what kind of informs our list a little bit and where we're coming from. So,
well, how do you feel about lists in general? Like
they're very hard.
We are approaching list season, and like I told you off air, I've already started making my preliminary album of the year list. This is a really important time for the movie, music, television, pop culture discussion space because a lot of people, it's a big thing for a lot of people.
I have no problem making end of year lists at all, really. All time lists, favorite lists are very, very hard.
Which one was the toughest for you to do? And which one was the easiest?
Music was the hardest.
Music was the hardest for me as well.
And that's just because I actually had so many options.
Of course.
Whereas my movie list,
and you can interpret it so many different ways.
Look, I'll talk about them. I'll talk about this whole idea in general. The reason why it's harder all time is because it's hard to decide if you want to make your list out of the movies that you have like the most fond memories of, or what you think are like legitimately the best movies you've ever seen.
There's like a critical perspective and then there's a personal perspective.
Yeah, and there's also the perspective of like I get uncomfortable when I feel like my list is too modern. Like if I'm like Spider-Man Homecoming, Wonder Woman, and like a movie like Godfather isn't on my list.
Yeah.
Like that's my own paranoia because I'm like I have to consider both.
I get it.
So I want to make sure that I'm representing all of cinema and not just the 2000s, and so I get very weary of that. But then the more I think about it, it's like that's not interesting. If I talk about, I mean, there are some like all time greats that I love very much, like
Citizen Kane.
No, but like. Almost Famous or Butch and Sundance, like just some like really
Casablanca is I love that movie.
I like
it's not
that a
my
lot.
top 10, but I
like
do
it
love
a lot.
that movie.
Yeah. But yeah, I realize this list has to just say Ryan Snelling. It doesn't have to say best movies of all time. And my movies list, the reason why it's easier, it's not just because I'm a bigger movie fan, obviously, but this list hasn't budged in years. Like this, what I'm about to reveal has been the 5 for since whatever the year the most recent movie came out. So that'll be 2008.
Right.
So it's been almost 10 years that I've had this list.
So it's funny.
And no, it's not Step Brothers.
Music was the hardest for me to do. TV was the easiest for me to do. And like you said, an all-time list is very interpretive because it can go so many different ways. Lists in general, exactly what you said. I made this point on the music episode that will no longer be heard, but the whole difference between a personalist and a criticalist. You sort of have to sit on one side or the other. One of the things that I've been very careful of doing, and I think we've sort of succeeded in this, is creating a a support group on our Facebook and whatnot that champions the idea of whatever you like, own it, fucking own it. And nobody should ever ridicule you for liking that. Nobody should ever make fun of you for liking that. I mean, we can disagree on it. We can have a debate on it, but like what you like. And we will police that. Like, I will never allow anybody to say such and such is my favorite movie and somebody be like, are you a fucking idiot? It's not welcome. It's just not. Whatever you like it and own it. But that does exist 100%. To be like, people are gonna not.
I think this. We've talked about that before, and I started thinking a lot more about it when I did my movie bucket list with Ellis, and Ellis was just like, you just shouldn't be self-conscious. Like, don't feel weird that The Godfather isn't on your favorite list, because that's not. It's just not. And the more I think about it, I'm not even really interested in that list.
Yeah.
100%. Like I said, I want this to be all Ryan Snelling. And so
each of my lists that we're going to talk about here, I did interpret them very differently from one another.
I think what's fascinating about the TV section, and we'll get into it here in a minute, but I'm very
movies are first.
I know.
Okay,
I'm just saying when we get to TV, I realized that I have more comedies than drama.
I think I was approaching that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So movies? You want me to start off?
Let's kick it off. Yeah. You're the movie guy. Kick it off.
My number 5 is The Lion King.
Okay. The first memory I ever have of going to a movie theater, and it was in Frankfurt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't think it was the first movie I saw when I was a kid. I remember seeing like Pocahontas and
it wasn't the first movie. It's the first movie I legitimately remember.
Yeah. I was just giving my.
Oh, sorry. What an idiot.
So, so my dad took me to see The Lion King, and if my memory,
my dad took me to see The Lion King. My biological father.
If my memory serves me correctly, he took me to see it weekend after weekend after weekend when it was out. And before The Dark Knight, I think it was probably the movie that I'd seen the most in theaters. And then, of course, I went to revisit it when it came back out a few years ago. And I saw that with my mom and my younger sister. And I cried like a baby.
Yeah.
I cried more. There's a lot to it, I think, seeing it as an adult, even though it wasn't like the first time I'd seen it in 10 years or anything. Like I've consistently seen it, and obviously it's my 5th favorite movie of all time. But it's just crazy to me how much it affects me, even as an adult. And just grappling the Mufasa thing, and I think that's what a lot of people my age deal with. One of their first is dealing with that kind of death in the movie. And it's also just, it's so funny how much darker it is when you revisit it.
Absolutely.
And then you understand the Shakespearean aspects to it. And then some of the scenes, like there's that whole like Third Reich Scar scene where all the hyena soldiers are like, like all of those scenes are a lot more interesting seeing them now. But
I haven't watched it in a long time.
Yeah, it's I just, from the beginning, it was something that I was always into, and it's one of those things, like, you know how when you go back and look at old pictures of yourself, and I mean, I've gone back and looked through the photo albums and seen all my Lion King shirts, all my Lion King toys that I forgot I had. And it's just always stuck with me, and always been such a pivotal film in my life, and it's just amazing.
Here's an interesting take from me thinking about it right now, is that growing up, actually not just growing up, in general, I've never been a huge fan of animated movies. I just haven't been. I like cartoons, obviously, on television and whatnot, but animated movies, especially talking animals, I always felt like I was more mature than that, like even as a kid, because I grew up watching one of the first movies I got obsessed with was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner. 1989 Batman, Ghostbusters 1 and 2, Ninja Turtles, like all live action stuff. But that was the first movie that I ever remember seeing that was animated. That one and Aladdin, and just being really enamored with it. Like I could watch this all the time.
I think there's a level of it just being cool. Like, because if you look at, okay, so I don't think it would make a whole lot more sense if like Cinderella and Snow White, Sleeping Beauty,
Beauty and the
like
Beast.
those, actually, I think Beauty and the Beast is actually fantastic, but that might have been the one.
It's a little overrated.
The first one.
It's a little overrated.
No, it's a really good movie. So
I remember like 4 things happening in that movie.
What I'm saying is, like, I think The Lion King is, obviously it's a universal, but it makes sense that that was the one that captured me as a guy or a young boy, you know, and the daddy issues and stuff, which I don't know, it makes a whole lot of sense that I think that stuck with me more so than 101 Dalmatians, you know, even though that was actually very huge to my childhood as well. But,
how excited are you for the live action? We haven't really talked about it that much. I mean, but outside of the fact that just Donald Glover in general and Jon Favreau being involved.
We talked about it a little bit. I think we talked about it when Donald Glover was cast, but I'm ecstatic.
Yeah.
I mean,
I still haven't seen Jungle Book.
there's not a single complaint
It's still on Netflix?
in my body. Yeah.
Jungle Book? I might watch that soon.
I can't believe it's happening. I'm so thrilled that the cast is so great.
I'm glad they waited.
The director is so great.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna be there first thing, front and center. What's your number 5?
My number 5, this makes me happy just reading it and about to say it out loud. It's Jerry Maguire. I fucking love this movie.
Yeah?
The first time I ever saw this movie, my parents bought it. Okay, I have so many memories about this movie. So my first memory of this movie was the Secret Garden theme song. Was that, what's his name? The boss, I forget his name. Bruce Springsteen, I think. I could be wrong. But they used to play this song on the radio all the time. And it was like 8 minutes long because it would have quotes from the movie spliced in it. Like the whole "You Complete Me" thing.
Yeah.
I knew that line before I ever saw the movie because they would literally splice it in the song on the fucking radio. And I would be like, this is bizarre to me. I remember my parents bought it because there was so much hype around the movie when it came out, oddly enough. But there was a sex scene in it, a really hot sex scene.
Yes.
And I remember my parents owned it, and I would steal it just to watch that sex scene as a kid. And watched it as a kid, and you know, it was fine. It was what it was. I wasn't really into movies like that at the time, but I remember revisiting it much later when it should have been dated and laughing my ass off. And to this day, more as an adult, I would talk to people who hadn't seen it before and show it to them, and they would love it. I mean, Kayla has loved it. Other ex-girlfriends have loved it.
So we should do a never before seen.
You've never seen it. It's one of the only Tom Cruise movies.
That I haven't seen.
It is a great movie. Not only is it hilarious, I think it's one of the funniest Tom Cruise movies that's ever existed. It's also an amazing, like, just story in general. And Cuba Gooding Jr. in that movie gets me every time. Chokes me up.
He's great. He's just underutilized and past his prime.
You mean Snow Dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you mean OJ? If you haven't seen Jerry Maguire, come on, guys.
How you doing?
Like, get your head out of your ass.
I'll watch it.
All right.
I'm glad to hear that.
Never before seen. All right. What's your number 4?
Minority Report, keeping with the Tom Cruise tradition.
That's cool. We just watched that not super long ago.
Yeah. Minority Report is my Blade Runner.
Still holds up.
It still holds up. It's
Kayla predicted the ending.
So I think I've told this story. Yeah, she did. I think I've told this story before, but I didn't have HBO, and this was shortly after the movie actually came out. So I guess a year later, when HBO, plays movies over and over after they've first been released. But we had like a free HBO weekend or something, and I was just flipping through the channels, and this is the only time that I've ever condoned this. This is the first time, one of the only times it's ever happened to me. When I got on HBO, it was well into the movie. Like, I think the first thing that I saw with that movie was as soon as he leaves the nightclub after he found out he has no minority report,
Right.
and it's them in the car and she's shaking, and then he gets her clothes in the mall. From that point until the very end was my first experience with Minority Report. So I had the ending messed.
I think you told me this before. Yeah, it's fascinating.
So I had the ending ruined for me without seeing the entire movie, and I also just didn't really have a context as to what pre-crime was yet. Like, think about it. I missed out on that entire preamble for the movie.
Yeah.
But I was so locked in and engaged and just like couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah.
That I watched that movie 2 more times fully that weekend. One, so that I could see the entire story, and the third time just because I was so enamored with it. So, and this was even before I, consciously knew, like, okay, this is Steven Spielberg, it's Tom Cruise, like, all of that aside, it just blew my mind. And the older I've gotten, the more I appreciate how intricate the plotting is, and it's just a hell of a movie. I think it's one of Spielberg's best, to be honest. I think it's arguably Tom Cruise's best. Maybe you can contest that with Jerry Maguire as far as performances go, but I think there's just not a weak link in that chain. It's just 100% interesting, and I love it.
Yeah. My only real take with Minority Report, at least I agree, it's an incredible movie. It's crazy that it still holds up as well as it does. That was around a time when people hadn't really figured out the best way to utilize CGI at that time, and just, the best use of green screen. I mean, when did that movie come out?
Either 2001 or like 2003.
So
something
not
like that.
too far removed from The Phantom Menace, which is notorious for having just some really dated looking.
Phantom Menace is 99.
Yeah.
I don't think Phantom Menace has dated effects.
I mean,
there's obviously
just its utilization, its implementation, and how it was used with the acting. I mean, people say that all the time. The actors look disconnected from things going on around them.
A lot of Phantom Menace was actually practical. It's not until Attack of the Clones and definitely Revenge
even
of the
that
Sith.
wasn't too far removed from Minority Report. But regardless, I remember seeing that movie for the first time and not having a decent network of people that I knew that really enjoyed movies like that, and thinking to myself, this is a great movie, but I don't know if anybody else agrees with this. And then when I discovered that people beloved that movie, or that movie was beloved, I was like, yes, thank you so much. It's a fantastic film.
So I think the desaturation and the way that it's filmed and the way that it's colored, it still looks grainy and interesting, but I think that helps with the CGI. Even though the ships, like the pre-crime ships, some of those establishing shots look really good. And again, I talked about sort of the ending and how much it had a huge impact on me. I think it's arguably one of the greatest openings I've ever seen in any movie ever.
I agree. Colin Farrell, underdog in that movie, just in terms of
really good
his performance.
That was the start of my Colin Farrell romance.
For sure. On my number 4?
Yeah.
We kind of forgot to do this, so I'll do it now because it'll kind of shape this next pick. But my interpretation of making this list was not just movies that I love and enjoy and I personally think are great, but also rewatchability factor. Movies that I will just love. Like, there's a movie that I'll just put it out there. I omitted Inception from this list because I tried to go back and rewatch it not that long ago, and I just didn't feel like watching it anymore. And that kind of bumped it down for me. And this one that I'm about to talk about, I love rewatching this movie, and it's 500 Days of Summer.
Okay.
I love this film. If you haven't picked up on it because of my opening too, I love a good love story. Like, not only do I love a good love story, but I also like the quirky aspect and the comedy, obviously the romantic comedy vibes in films when they're done right, when they're done in a smart way. And 500 Days of Summer is just one of the more modern takes on that. And also just because, like, I don't know, I've always been into things that are a little bit melodramatic, like albums that are about breakups and stuff like that because I can relate more to them.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't had like the hardest life in the entire world, so a lot of my problems and whatnot are pretty dumb. And it's just like a movie like that. Also, a movie that's very wrapped up around music. Shout out to Mark Webb.
Yeah.
In general, Joseph Gordon-Levitt absolutely kills it in that movie. Zooey Deschanel. I mean, one of the first times I saw her play somebody that was just kind of unlikable to a certain perspective.
It's it is a very millennial take on the genre, and I think
talking about Morrissey and the Smiths.
I think that it's probably, like, as of right now, in my opinion, I think it's probably held in the highest regard,
right,
of rom-coms of our generation.
Right.
Like number one, I would say, is 500 Days of Summer.
It's such a good movie that it put my expectations of romantic comedies in probably an unreachable and an unattainable spectrum. Like,
right.
I remember every time I watch this movie, I'm like, man, I want to watch other stuff like this, and they just don't really exist.
And then Adam Sandler comes out with Just Go With It,
exactly,
with Jennifer Aniston, and it's like, okay, all right.
Exactly.
Very good.
Yeah, and that's just why I appreciate it. It's legitimately, especially in a modern sense, it's on a pedestal, I think. And
I agree.
I just really, really enjoyed the film.
Zooey Deschanel, that was her coming out party, I think. I mean, she's been around for a long time. She was in Almost Famous. But I think that's when people really started like, hey, I have a huge crush on you.
Yeah. I knew her as the wife of Ben Gibbard, well, ex-wife now of Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie.
Oh, right, okay.
But
is this thing going, by the way? Like, on the top part?
Yeah, it is.
It's freaking me out because it's not. I don't see it running on the.
It's okay.
Okay, very good. So my number 3.
Yeah.
By the way, I love 500 Days of Summer. Only seen it once though.
Awesome.
I should revisit it.
Really? I own it. Not on Blu-ray though.
I think I do. I think I do too. I think I picked it up.
I'm gonna go add it to my iTunes.
You should.
Did you know? This is random side note. So they released the Apple TV 4K, the latest edition, and did you know that if you've bought an HD film from Apple on iTunes, they're just going to upgrade it to 4K for you automatically for free?
That's the first time I've ever been impressed by an Apple benefit.
And they have the cheapest prices. I think $13.99 or $14.99 for 4K.
Not only on Vudu, that's where my movie collection is because I use ultraviolets. Not only do you have to still purchase the 4K, but you have to purchase it at the full price.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a bummer.
It sucks.
But for whatever reason, Apple decided to do some real dumb shit with that device, and it's the Apple TV 4K, but they will not let you stream YouTube in 4K on it. Makes no sense. Yeah, really dumb.
Tim Cook. So
fuck you.
My number 3 is The Dark Knight.
Okay.
I talked about seeing Lion King multiple times in theaters. Saw The Dark Knight 7 times in theaters. This was probably at the height, or sort of like when I don't know if I'd call it the peak, but this is when I was really, really getting into movies in high school. Like, and Batman Begins, I have the infamous story, the story that, you know, tells everything you need to know about me in one tell, which is I refused to make out with the freshman girl during Batman Begins. And that movie came out, and I was all about it because of Batman. But again, I didn't have the knowledge of Christopher Nolan. Like, this is why I should be paying attention to this.
Had you seen Memento
prior
to that? Okay.
No. My first Christopher Nolan movie was Batman Begins. So yeah. So The Dark Knight came out, and obviously I was really, really excited because I really enjoyed Batman Begins. But I mean, again, amongst the Heath Ledger hype and everything that was going on, plus I was really... I got to theorize, like the way that we speculate on all the movies.
Right.
This was the first time I was really doing this, like 2008 with Cloverfield, and now this, and I mean those were in the same year. It's a really fun year, 2008.
DC movies were king over Marvel at that time, just because of how good Batman Begins was. Legitimately,
it's like, well, I mean,
Marvel hadn't really been as established yet.
Yeah. So, at least in the way they are now. So, certainly, this movie was everything. I mean, like, this movie was inspired by Heat. I mean, this is my Heat, even though I do love Heat. And it's just everything and more. And there's not a whole lot more that I can add to the conversation because I think everyone agrees it's, arguably one of the best superhero films ever, even though I don't agree that it's one of the best Batman movies ever, but I do think it's one of the best movies ever. Why'd you wince like that?
Just got a comment on After Schmo. We had a person who picked up on Flourish for the first time. Curious of how he did it. Somebody responded to him, I am not keyed in on this. What's going on? Is this guy making fun of you because of how you pronounce Flourish? Hey guys, we got a new listener on our hands. That's how I judge that.
Goodman wants
royalties. He can fuck off.
Because he saw the merchandise and he would like royalties because he's the one that said Flourish. Yeah. Actually, that's not even really how it happened. That's a long story that nobody cares about. It involves someone that's never been mentioned on this podcast at all. But anyway.
Yeah, you know what, Goodman? If you want to go to court, we can go to court because it would cost me way less money than it would cost you.
Oh, man. So, anyway. Do you have anything to add to the conversation? It's the Dark Knight is the Dark Knight, and that's pretty much all I have to say.
I really, really enjoy the film. What more can you say about Heath Ledger? I don't know if I've ever really said this on a podcast before, but we talked a little bit earlier this year when Chester Bennington passed away. I was like really deeply affected by Heath Ledger passing because he was somebody I felt like I had almost unintentionally followed his career. I really enjoyed almost every single movie he had been in up to The Dark Knight. Like I loved.
Did you watch 10 Things I Hate About You?
Loved it. Loved A
Knight's Tale?
Actually, I saw A Knight's Tale after the fact, but I love Brokeback Mountain. I think it's a fantastic movie. And just when he passed away, just the fact that he was such a talent. Yeah. Like to be lost to something, it's such a bummer. And I mean, seeing that movie, I remember crying in that movie when I saw the Joker in a body bag. Like that's how much it affected.
Oh
me.
Yeah, me too. I remember.
I was just like, I couldn't take it. And seeing the film, I mean, as tragic as that is, God, did he leave a mark?
I know.
I mean, literally defined, I think, what we think of as, I mean, we're talking about benchmarks. Fuck, man. I mean, a villain like that.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to say the Joker and superhero. No,
villains,
movie villains.
Yeah.
He is arguably the greatest movie villain.
You want a villain that you love.
Yes. And the thing about that, too, is it was so intriguing that arguably, at least the reports back then, I haven't read up on it recently, but he arguably died because of how the movie affected him.
Right.
And that always really fascinated me too. And it's just unreal, that whole thing. And yeah. So anyway, obviously just being the huge Batman fan, I just felt like it was the movie that us Batman fans deserved. Even though it isn't the most Batman type movie, but it's just such a high quality film.
Right.
But and also being able to see, I thought Two-Face turned out well. And you can argue his place in the story, but I mean, just like the look of it and everything, I thought worked, and I thought that was really interesting. And I remember when he gets his face burned, and I remember being surprised, even though I knew what was going to happen, and I just kind of thought that was kind of special too. Like,
for sure.
I think one of those things is the way that kind of Christopher Nolan had his own little twist on everything, and so, and just having such a great cast in there as well. So anyway, that's enough said about The Dark Knight.
That's your number 3?
Yeah.
My number 3 should have been Inception, but like I said, I thought about it and it was bumped, and then it made me really think about the criteria that I was setting up here about movies that not only I love to rewatch, but also make me think and that I just hold in high regard. This is the first time I've ever put this movie up here, and it's surprising that I've never done it before. That's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Oh, wow.
I was super moved the first. Actually, I have a very similar story to seeing that movie for the first time that you do with Minority Report. I watched that movie in the middle of it, in the midst of the crazy shit going on.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this? And I remember rewatching it from the first time again, and just no movie makes me walk away from it legitimately not questioning, but thinking about and considering reality, memory, and those are things that I'm fascinated with in general. I mean, then you mix it in again with romantic comedies and such an original take on it. It's just a special film, and the acting in it is great. So many amazing cameos in it. I loved watching it and seeing your reaction to some of the people in it for the
Elijah
first time.
Wood, right?
Well, he's in it, yeah. I mean, I don't want to spoil who's in it, but I mean, it's just a great movie, and it's such an original film.
Yeah.
And I also feel like people who also have a connection with it, those people have a connection because you're on a certain level, I think, of not necessarily deeper thought. I'm not trying to paint myself as some sort of insightful motherfucker, but it's just like you're obviously thinking about things in a different perspective. And anybody that's ever been in some sort of relationship that wishes they could have done things a certain way, it has a great commentary on that. I loved it. You saw the movie more recently for the first time. What's your take on it?
It's one of those movies that I really wish that I saw earlier in my life.
Would you have written a Brave the Storm song about it? So many songs have been written about this movie.
I mean, I think that's a possibility. I mean, if I can write a song about Terminator Salvation, I can write a song about this. But yeah, I wish that I'd seen it earlier, only because I don't have a bad thing to say about it.
Yeah.
But as far as like getting me in the gut, it didn't get there for me. And I think that was the only thing I really had said in my review that was negative, is that I wanted to feel it more. And I think I might have been high while we were watching that too.
I think you were.
But which should make it better.
Well, here's another thing to take into consideration with that. So I had heard Juturna by Circus Survive.
Yeah.
And obviously Meet Me in, I'm sorry.
Brand New.
Brand New as well. And to get the context of that after seeing that movie was also incredibly rewarding. Like I know Christian loves this film. I would love Christian to listen to Juturna thinking about, I don't think he'd like it, but thinking about the movie. I mean, maybe he would. I mean,
Christian loves The Doors.
That's true, but there's so many. Is Anthony Green the modern Jim Morrison? Yeah, I don't know. I love the movie.
How many bands did Jim Morrison have? Did he have as many as Anthony Green?
No. Fuck no. I don't think anybody has.
Yeah.
There's bands that I don't think Anthony
Johnny
Green
Craig
remembers.
maybe.
Good God.
So
run to your number 2.
That I patted.
I mean, punt. I can't remember what my number 2 is. Oh, my number 2 is Good Will Hunting.
Oh, okay. Awesome. 2 Matt Damon movies for our number 2s.
Yeah.
Powerful.
So it took me forever to see this movie. I didn't see this movie for the first time until like the last maybe 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
And again, another movie that I'm not going to say it shouldn't hold up, but it's hard to watch this movie because Matt Damon has been in our subconscious for so long as an older person.
Yeah.
That, man, no movie gets me in the gut like this. I also love anything involving Boston in general, like anything involving Boston. It's just such a good story. Like,
it's just,
there's really nothing more to it than that. It's a great story.
Much like Eternal Sunshine,
Yeah.
After you watch it for the first time, you're just thinking, you just sit there and want to go, fuck, man.
How?
I mean, that's the reaction is fuck, man.
A movie like this, honestly, on paper, shouldn't have the rewatchability factor that it does for me. But I love it, man. The characters are so rich. Ben Affleck, an incredible job in that film. The speech that he has with Matt Damon is incredible. I mean, Matt Damon, obviously really great. Robin Williams at his best. I mean, in that film, I love it.
Every single performance in that movie kicks you in the nuts.
Yes.
And it's even more so effective knowing, like, these two were amateurs. Not that they'd done small stuff before, but, like, Ben Affleck, I love the idea of like that being the movie that they wrote together and they both got to make and star in. Like that is insane. And I don't know if something like that has ever happened, especially when you're able to go toe to toe with someone like Robin Williams. Stellan Skarsgård as well. He does a great job in the movie. Not in it as much, but it's just a movie that just kicks you in the nuts.
Also, a very different sort of. I would characterize it as somewhat of a coming of age film too, just in the sense where,
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, just the fact that, like, I love the dynamic of this guy who's sort of has a lot of things going against him and being so smart, and just that looming presence of, having an Ivy League school centered around him is fascinating. Also, Minnie Driver.
I was gonna say, we can't forget Minnie Driver.
Minnie Driver also incredible in the film. Another great sort of love story thing. But yeah, I love the movie.
So good. It's good call.
Yeah.
Um,
Just go ahead and talk about The Departed, since it's your number 2.
Sure.
It's my number 1.
Sure.
Go ahead.
It was my turn for my number 1, but that's fine. The Departed, I don't even remember how this movie came up, to be honest. I just remember one day The Departed being one of the best movies I've ever seen. I can't remember who I first watched it with and where I was. Actually, yeah, I do. I was with Phil.
Did you see it in theaters?
No.
I did.
We watched it in we watched it at his house, and he showed it to me. And I don't know if I've ever seen a movie that has two characters that well developed.
Yeah.
It's like it's one of the only times that I can think of where the hero and the villain, for one, you have no idea which is which the entire time. Which
at least upon first viewing, yeah.
It doesn't happen often with movies.
Right.
You don't know who to root for. Both characters are, despicable in their own ways. But that makes them so complex and so interesting. And the fact that this movie is able to divide screen time with two characters that are just as interesting as each other.
And the rest of the cast.
They're
the ensemble cast that it has.
Yes.
Ugh.
They are so well developed. And when they first meet for the first time, that rooftop scene, not only is there so much weight going into that, but I think it's one of the most intense scenes I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just get really excited when actors finally just blow up and start yelling at each other. And that kind of happens, like one of my favorite moments in Minority Report is when Tom Cruise turns around with the hood and says, "Don't you ever say his name."
Yeah.
Like, it just gets me really pumped up when people start yelling. And the fact that Leo is just beating the shit out of Matt Damon and they're just screaming at each other because
I'm putting you under arrest.
Yeah, they are feeling.
Are we spoiling this movie for people right now?
They are feeling everything that we are feeling. Like it was just so symbiotic, and it's great. And it's also just really fun to watch because of the Boston element as well. It's one of those movies, like, I think 4 of the 5 movies on my list are 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
All of them move breezily. And I think that just says a whole hell of a lot about most of our list here. But they're just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm sorry, I didn't finish my thought. The Boston aspect is just really fun too, because there's a lot of funny elements to it as well.
So I talked about the rewatchability factor of this, and people probably knew this was if you've paid attention to Sight and Sound for any amount of time, you've known that this is my favorite movie of all time. But I watch this movie once a year. Like since 2006 when it came out, that's just how it was. I saw this movie in the theater for the first time because I had heard that there was some buzz about it, but it was also a movie that I remember nobody seeing for a really, really long time, at least for me in my circles. There are so many benefits to rewatching this movie over and over and over again. First of all, there's just the first time of experiencing it. It is an experience. And then every time I rewatch it, I find something that I focus in on each time that I didn't before. Like, for instance, this movie is fucking hilarious. It is so funny. And then you can rewatch it mainly focusing on one storyline over the other, and just like all the nuances. The writing in this movie is so intricate and complex, and there's so many little minor details that you can easily miss. The shock and awe of it. I mean, it's the music. I mean, the music in general is a character in the movie. It's the way the music is mixed. I don't talk about music in movies that much, but the way it's mixed, I mean, there are parts where the music just absolutely crushes you, like comes in blaring. I mean, yeah, it's fantastic. And I just love everything about the movie. Boston also just being a character in the film as well, a crucial part to the movie's plot.
They filmed most of it in New York, actually.
It's it's just a special movie that, again, I love showing it to people for the first time. I love the reactions to what transpires. It's a fun movie. It's a crushing movie, and it's a ride, man. It's a ride. Like I don't find these types of rides in films like this unless it's like a legit action movie. But by the end of it, you feel exhausted.
There are so many scenes in this movie. It moves so quick and so fast. It's a rush for 2.5 hours.
Right.
And I can think of, for me, iconic scene after iconic scene. That night at the bar between Leo and Frank.
Yeah.
There, when he's talking about being a rat.
A lot of that was improv.
Yeah, it's crazy. And just the intros to all the characters. It's just, there's so many scenes that are just so great and that
Mark
stick out to
Wahlberg,
me.
one
Mark
of my
Wahlberg.
favorite characters in that whole
The
movie.
cast kicks ass. Oh my
Yeah.
god, all around. Best Picture winner.
Yep.
And a lot of people have a problem with that
Yeah.
because it's the only one that Scorsese's gotten. And
A lot of people feel like it wasn't as justified either.
I think that as time goes on, some people are like, okay, The Departed, and I'm like,
I know,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, The Departed. It kicks
I know.
ass.
You know who didn't like The Departed?
Who?
Finstock.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I love it. It is arguable. Well, I guess it is my favorite Scorsese film because it's number 2 on my list.
Right.
So yeah, hell yeah.
All right, you're number 1.
It's Fight Club.
Yep.
I did a whole episode on this, but to be very brief, and I just want to hear your take on it. The movie was the movie that got me into movies. It was such a kick in the nuts. Eye-opening as cinema, but also just talk about rewatchability. A 2.5-hour movie. I mean, that movie never gets old for me. The twist is obviously huge and so well done for me. Brad Pitt's my favorite Brad Pitt performance. Edward Norton. There's just so much to say about it, but I think the thing that sticks with me the most.
Wait, real quick. Have you seen American History X?
Yes.
Okay. I got on an Edward Norton kick after seeing Fight Club. If you want to know how good of an actor Edward Norton is, watch those 2 movies back to back.
That's I'll come back to that, but I just have a really quick point I
Yeah.
was going to make when you were talking about Eternal Sunshine. But the biggest takeaway, aside from the twist being amazing and it blew my mind, and aside from the fact that it was like it was the movie that got me into movies, but I think it's because of its attitude and personality. I mean, that movie
100%.
That movie is a living, breathing thing, unlike anything I've ever seen before in my life. And I've seen a lot of movies that have like Fight Club moments or like TV shows that copycat Fight Club and things like that. It's so iconic to me. And I think that's another one of those movies that as time goes on, I hear less people talk about it and I don't understand. I don't get why. Every time I watch that movie and it changes my worldview for like a week.
Yeah.
Like I am so fucking pissed after I watch that movie. I'm just over everything when I watch that movie, and I just want to throw my phone out the car window, and like it literally changes me when I watch that movie. It's nuts. I mean, most movies don't do that.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because first of all, the funny thing about Fight Club is the further down the rabbit hole that you go with that movie, there's so many things to become a fan of. There, you can become a fan of the actors, Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, 100%. That's easy. But just how David Fincher, when you figure out that David Fincher made that movie and you watch the rest of his movies, that movie just has Fincher written all over it.
Yeah.
I mean, the aesthetic in general of that film is iconic in and of itself, I think. Just that house that they spend so much time in.
Paper Street.
David Fincher made that house come to life. I mean, the green tent that throughout the entire movie. I mean, how it's incredible. Then you go down a rabbit hole of, you can go down a rabbit hole of his, and then you can just go down an entire rabbit hole of Chuck Palahniuk in general. This movie sent me down a rabbit hole of Chuck Palahniuk. I've read a bunch of Chuck Palahniuk novels. This is one of the only movies that I've actually read the book to. Not as good. One of the very few instances where the book is not as good as the film. And yeah, I didn't have the same like
Max Landis argued that exact point on movie fights.
What's that?
Fight Club movies, way better than the book.
It's a common thing that, I mean, and it's not anything against Chuck Palahniuk's writing. It's just that's how good Fight Club is as a movie. But I don't share the same sentiment with you necessarily from like a social perspective. Like, it doesn't make me feel a particular way. I just remember, to sort of what you were saying, this is one of the first movies where I saw it and I saw how it transpired and I saw the ending and I said to myself, oh, stories can do this. And I was just kind of blown away by it. And you're right. The attitude of the movie is unique in and of itself. It bleeds the definition of punk rock. Like, it is a punk rock film.
There's so much commentary on consumerism and just vanity, holding things in high regard,
capitalism, yeah.
And the whole point of the character is Tyler's trying to take him to rock bottom and strip him away of everything that he holds valuable, because we spend so much time in our lives deciding that these things have value when they don't.
And Chuck Palahniuk is brilliant at doing that, at really deep diving in the inner subconscious of people. His stories don't always play out quite as effective, but he's great at that.
It also just holds up.
Oh, 100%.
And it came out.
It's timeless.
It came out in one of the greatest years in cinematic history. I don't care. 1999. Fuck.
Great for music too.
Nuts. And the fact that
Slipknot?
that movie legitimately looks like it was made a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Like, put it up against the most recent Fincher movie. What did he do recently? Gone Girl? Is that his last movie?
Sure.
Gone Girl, Dragon Tattoo. They all look the exact same. It's crazy.
Even Social Network.
Social Network, yeah. They all just look like Fincher movies, and they don't age easily at all.
Judith by A Perfect Circle.
So
Closer by 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah, that movie just, it's great. I love it.
It's
so
great.
Much.
I have a poster of it hanging up in my living room.
You can hear me expand on this on a movie episode I did a couple episodes ago. Why Fight Club is my number one. So go check that out.
Yeah. Just to close out this segment, this is the first top 5 we've done. Talking retroactively about movies is fun. I don't think people do it enough, except unless you're top 10 podcast.
So,
but
one thing I was going to mention, because you brought up Eternal Sunshine, and one of the points I was going to make is that, or I did make this point, but I didn't expand. I wish I saw it earlier in my life, because there was a time in high school where a lot of, as we were coming of age and discovering all these different movies, Eternal Sunshine was the title that kept popping up.
Yeah.
And it was like, I don't know if you had this stage, but it was like Eternal Sunshine, Garden State, Boondock Saints,
100%.
American History X.
I call those scene movies.
It was
movies that people,
yes,
that emo kids,
yes,
scene kids just love to reference.
Like, those were the movies, like hanging out at my friend Reed's house. Those are the movies that we watched. And
the book, Perks of Being a Wallflower, constantly being referenced all the time. Hey,
yes.
you read Perks of Being a Wallflower? No.
Yes. And then there was that one movie where the author came out as a fraud or whatever, A Million Little Pieces or something like that. Do you remember that?
Nope.
Very good. Anyway,
Yeah.
I saw that entire group of movies when everyone was in that phase, but Eternal Sunshine was the one that got away from me, and obviously I didn't watch until last year or 2 years ago. So.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I think music is next. So let's take a break because I have to pee. We'll be right back. Have you ever listened along with Sight and Sound and thought to yourself, man, I would love to have these types of conversations with other like-minded individuals? Well, there's a place for that. Head over to Facebook and be sure to join the Sight and Sound Facebook group. It was started by our listeners to share their thoughts and opinions, react and comment on episodes and topics brought up on episodes. You can even interact with Ryan and myself. It is a fantastic community that we are proud of, and we think you should join it. We've even made it easy for you. Check out the link in the description box of this podcast and get involved with the Sight and Sound Facebook group today. Before we get into this, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
How do you feel about me growing out my beard? Have you noticed?
No.
Do you know why I'm growing out my beard?
No. Winter is coming?
I went to trim it the other day, and I've lost the piece that connects to my beard trimmer. So the only thing I can do right now is shave it completely down.
Yeah.
And I've bought 2 beard trimmers in the last probably 5 years and tried to switch beard trimmers, and they're way too complicated for me to work.
Why?
I don't know. They have too many goddamn pieces.
I don't have a problem because I have to cut my hair that way anyway, so I deal with that a lot. My biggest problem though is because I'm obviously using a hair trimmer, electric hair trimmer
For your beard?
Yeah, I do
Okay.
use it for my beard, but I mean for everything. So
I saw a picture of you recently from the past. I don't know why or where. I was looking at it without a beard. Prefer the beard.
definitely,
100%.
definitely, and that's one thing I was going to ask you. But
Every man should have a beard.
I definitely look better with a beard, 100%. But that's one thing I was going to ask you because I have some patchiness going on. So I was wondering,
So do I.
can I help? Would it help if I started shaving myself down to the skin instead of just trimming it over and over again?
I used to have shitty facial hair, like really shitty. And the more I would just shave it and just let it grow and then shave it and let it grow, it got better.
Like shave it to the skin, shave
Yeah.
it, yeah.
The best facial hair like story I could possibly tell you was John, my old roommate, was notoriously known for, people used to ask him if he shaved his arms because it looked like he didn't have hair. His hair was so light
Yeah.
and he was just baby face his whole life, couldn't grow shit. He's now known for having like this ridiculous red beard, and he literally used beard growing pills and like creams and stuff. I swear to God.
Interesting.
It just happened overnight.
Yeah.
Not overnight, but it happened over the span of like a year. I'm like, okay.
I recently switched out like my body wash and shampoos, fragrance free, all that kind of stuff. No sodium lauryl sulfate and all that.
Okay, yeah, sure.
The
Talking
organic
about bands yet?
the organic shampoo that I have has literally been growing hair back. Like I can touch my hair and I feel seedlings sprouted. And I'm like, I wish I had done this.
You need to give that to Indy.
I wish I had done this 6 years ago, and maybe I would have all the hair that I.
It could be like Indy, and when I gave him the probiotics, the hair grew back, but just in the spots where he already had hair, so it was just growing like
So
longer.
my problem with the razor that I use is that, it's great that I don't have to pay for haircuts.
You say razor. What do you
Hair
mean?
trimmer, the
Okay.
electric hair trimmer. I don't have to pay for haircuts. I buy a $20 hair trimmer, and I'm set for a couple months because I have to replace it because I'm so bad about letting it rust. I don't know why. I don't know why it rusts so easily.
Never had a.
And it comes with oil.
Do you do it in the shower?
No, but like I when hair's on it, I wash it
You get like a dehumidifier or something. How's it rusted? I've had this same beard
because I
trimmer.
put it under the sink, and I guess it just gets stuck in there in the blades, even though I let it out and like I leave it out to dry. I don't know. I've never understood.
I've had
it.
the same beard trimmer for probably 10 years.
Do you put the oil in it?
Nope. I don't do shit.
I don't
to
even
it.
know what that's for. I don't know.
I don't either. Just use it and
Comes with oil.
blow on it. Regardless, let's talk about music. Let's talk about albums. We both agreed the most difficult. In fact, it was so difficult for me that I asked. I was like, "Can we do like favorite bands?" Because I don't keep an active. I actually say this a lot. I don't keep. People ask me sometimes, "What's your favorite albums?" I don't keep a list of my favorite albums because I am so determined to keep up with what's new. And I know it's strange, like the music guy. I just don't actively listen to older albums that often.
I just think favorite bands is way more difficult because
Well, I could do favorite bands right now.
One of the bands on my list has only one good album. Another band on the list has like 2 albums total, and I'm not sure how I feel about the other one. And it's like, it's just so hit or miss. And it's like, the way I calculated it, and I was like, well, we're not talking about best directors.
Yeah.
So let's not do best artists. Let's talk about best albums. Just because it's a thing. That's the product. The same way that the movies are the product. So it just made more sense for me.
Yeah. Look, I think you started off the last one. I'll start off this one. I do actually have a couple of honorable mentions I just want to throw out there just for the hell of it. One is Thrice's Visu album. Just really good. And Kanye West, 808s and Heartbreak. That's an album for me that I couldn't honestly put on the list because I don't think it's aged well, honestly, but it represents so much in his career, in music in general, and for me, I wore that fucking album out. But my number 5 on my list is Volcano Choir's Repave, and this is a Justin Vernon project from Bon Iver. Bon Iver is my favorite living artist right now, in the past has been for the past decade. There is no Bon Iver album on this list. This is the only thing that he represents. In fact, when I've reviewed Bon Iver albums, the highest grade I've ever given one of his projects was a B+. I have issues with his full albums. Love him. I love the idea and all of this. However, I've also gone on record as saying this is the best, in my opinion, the best album full album from front to back he's ever been involved with. It is a full band. It's not just his brainchild. It's not him doing everything. It's a full band, and I talk a lot about how I'm not a lyrics guy, and being a lyrics guy with Justin Vernon is not the greatest because he sings about nonsense sometimes. I actually have an emotional connection with this album. He sings a lot about his relationship to where he's from.
Yeah.
Talks about his relationships with family, some of the metaphors he uses for dealing with anxiety within relationships with people, with loved ones, with family members, with friends. It's incredible. And when you mix that in with the music and how the music was composed, it's all just very, very fascinating. It's a beautiful album. It's also a wacky album. It's not for everybody, but I love it. And it's
awesome.
great. Do you have any take at all on Justin Vernon after doing this podcast for a year and hearing me bring him up all the time?
This podcast, no offense, it's never made me listen to Bon Iver more. Like
I get it.
I just am. I'm never driven to his music.
Okay. If you have ever heard anything from him, you will know whether or not it's for you or not. Anything. You could hear 30 seconds of a song.
I love the Architects cover.
However, I will say episode 1 of More Than Music, everybody should listen to it because there's a level of understanding his past to understanding, enjoying his music. But anyways, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is
Volcano Choir.
Oh Sleeper's Son of the Morning.
Okay. This is a very technically sound band that I think are good at what they do.
So, Oh Sleeper, for those of you who don't know, is probably one of the most recent accessible metal artists. I think I talk about how my friend Sturgill, who had no business being in this music scene at all, and had heard my band and multiple bands in this genre, the screamo genre, he didn't take to any of them. He hated that type of music, and for whatever reason, this specific album, not just Oh Sleeper, this specific album, it was his crossover album, and I find that hilarious. But anyway, that has nothing to do with why I like it. Oh Sleeper, this is when Oh Sleeper started for me. Like, I heard their songs on their first album, and I liked a few, but I didn't experience the album in the way that I experienced Son of the Morning.
I think it's a much it has songs on it that are way better. Like, there are the really good songs on this album are so much better than anything they did on that first album.
It's just like the first one it's raw, but like this one is just better produced.
They're better at
polished,
what they do.
And yeah. I do think it's a better album, even though I've heard a lot of purists say that the first one is their best.
Right.
But this album, and I think you'll pick up on this pattern throughout my entire list. But this is one of those albums where I have to listen to every song. Like, every song, the quality of it is just so evenly put that, like, depending on the day, my favorite song changes.
Right.
And I love listening to this album from front to back. Again, he's one of my favorite vocalists. I idolized his screams. I tried very hard to sound like him in my own band, but also love Shane Blay, the singer, the guitarist.
Of course.
Very
formerly of Between the Buried and Me.
Yeah, very interesting voice. And I think the other thing too is that this is like more than any of their other albums. This is very conceptual. Son of the Morning being a biblical reference, and the entire album. I can't remember how many.
Not to be confused with Sword of the Morning from Game of Thrones.
I think there's 11 songs on this album, but regardless, just bear with me. Every song until the last song is told from the perspective of the devil. It's all about the devil. And then the very last song is called The Finisher, and it's like from God's perspective, and it's like God responding to the rest of the album. And it's really, really cool and conceptual in that way. Another thing that Oh Sleeper does is I'm very guilty. I love tough guy lyrics. And the fact that they infused this tough guy lyric element to make it just very Old Testament.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the only bands that gets away with saying the word charlatan.
Right.
And I just thought it's just so epic. Like, I've never, like, epic is a word that I don't normally use for albums. And it just checks so many boxes for me. And I love that album a lot.
Yeah. My only real take on Oh Sleeper in general is, of all the metalcore bands that came around in this era, they actually are a very, very original band, in my opinion. Just their approach on songwriting. Like I said, they're a very technically sound band, but they also mix that in with relatively digestible songwriting. I mean, they just do. I've always respected the band. I've always appreciated them. Unfortunately for them, I think they came out at a time when the genre in general, even though they were very respected, was kind of moving out the door in terms of mainstream appeal, I think. And people were like, not necessarily throwing away their metalcore band shirts, but they were just like, it wasn't the best time for them, for their success. They still made great bodies of work.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great pick.
I want, if people are listening to this that aren't involved in metal, I would love for them to pick up. I would start with Son of the Morning, even though I
would.
I think the more accessible album is the one afterwards.
Yeah, a lot of people love that album.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like it. I don't think it's as good as Son of the Morning, but I do enjoy it. But anyway,
just a little nugget of information. I'm actually working on a top either 10 or 5 solid state albums of all time list coming very, very soon. Such a pivotal record label.
That's awesome.
My number 4, I have to look at it. I can't remember. Radiohead, In Rainbows. It took me forever to get into Radiohead. In fact, it was this album that actually got me into the band. You want to talk about albums that are gateway albums to a band? There's some bands out there that you can't just dive into. Like, you can't just get into you can't just get into Architects on any album. I would say that everybody has their suggestion of this is the album you should start out with, or even Coldplay. Like, there's certain albums that you really need to start with. A lot of people would say, OK Computer, and I get that. But if you really want to know what Radiohead is today, I think no album represents them better, not only where they are today, but also where they've been throughout the rest of their career than in Rainbows. When I talk about albums having a great listening experience and being dynamic, I talk about this idea of if you're no longer in the mood for like club bangers and hip hop albums, you need like a slow jam every now and then to sort of mix it up. This album does that incredibly. It flows so well. It starts off with this incredibly energetic dance track that is super in your face. I mean, really, really in your face. And then it turns into like a rock album, and then it turns into this really slow, weird thing. It's such an amazing experience to listen to from front to back. And this is a band that I just didn't care for the longest time. Anytime I heard Radiohead songs, they bored me to tears. I thought I just didn't get it. I didn't enjoy them. And when I finally heard this album, it clicked for me. And I've always, for me, this is the definitive Radiohead album. In my opinion, I think it's their best written work. I think it's their best from front to back. And I urge anybody, if you never tried, I wouldn't say for you specifically, actually know a Radiohead album for you specifically that I would issue to you, and it wouldn't be this one. But I think for most people, in general, this is the album to check out first.
In Rainbows was featured heavily in a short film I made on YouTube.
Yeah. The album that I would recommend to you if you ever really did want to get into Radiohead, it would actually probably be The Bends. It's their most, I think, straightforward, radio-friendly album. And like Coldplay, for instance, their album Parachutes was heavily influenced by that.
Oh, really?
Oh, 100%.
That's also a great album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to get into Radiohead. Isn't that such a weird statement? I would like to get into that, but I just don't know how. I don't know if I ever will, because no song, like you said, I got the boring vibe as well. I haven't heard anything from them that has caught me.
It's always strange to me when I find out what the big Radiohead songs are. Like, you know, Paranoid Android is such a bizarre song to be one of their biggest songs. Like, obviously Creep is one of their biggest songs, but they don't have any other music that really sounds like that.
Right.
But for Paranoid Android, or even, I don't know, even a song like the Pyramid Song, it's literally just a piano playing like for 6 minutes long. Couldn't be a more boring song. But I used to say that about Coldplay when I heard like Clocks for the first time. I was like, what do people like this?
Clocks?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's great. I love it. But at the time, I was like, what is this?
I know we're not talking about Clocks, but I'll never forget. It was like 2 a.m. and I would have been like 11 when this song came out.
Yeah.
And I think it like that Peter Pan movie that came out that starred Jeremy Sumter, that guy from like Louisville or whatever. That movie's been long forgotten. I think it was in the trailer for that, and I saw it like 3 a.m. And this is before Shazam existed. This was barely when MX existed, and I didn't know how to find this album. But that piano lead, that haunted me because I fucking loved that.
Yeah,
and I went a long time without actually figuring out what that song was.
Yeah,
I was so happy when I did.
Yeah, that's the other good thing about Radiohead too. You will hear Radiohead songs from time to time that you have heard in movies, and you'd be like, "Oh, okay." I get, like, Radiohead was featured prevalently in an episode of Leftovers, like not Legion. I'm sorry, Legion, not that long ago.
I think my therapist told me about that.
Okay, good. What's your number?
Number four comes from a band that I actually got from you.
Okay.
And you barely knew me when you suggested this band to me, and it's meant a lot to me over the years. So thank you very much. I'm going with "Full of War" by Conditions.
Oh yeah,
yes.
You like that?
So this was a movie that
Conditions, amazing songwriters.
So
amazing.
So let's talk about it, because Conditions I referenced earlier, whereas like they had like 2 or 3 EPs. And that's how you recommended. You sent me the "Keeping Pace with Planes" music video.
I don't remember this, but okay.
I know that's how long ago it was.
MySpace.
Yes.
Okay.
That's how long ago it was. We barely knew each other, and you just knew that I liked Seosin, and you just recommended this band.
Right. It
And
would have
that's-
been them and then Secret and Whisper. Like immediately.
I
back
was
to back.
really into that album. Is great.
That first time was amazing.
It is really good.
Yeah.
But it's not on my list. So, Conditions Full of War, or excuse me, those EPs came out and I liked a lot of the songs that were on them, but it wasn't like I was listening to those EPs from front to back. And then Fluorescent Youth came out, their very first debut, and I'll never forget waking up to buy that album and listen to it. And I loved it at the time, and I still really enjoy it.
Yeah.
But the songs haven't aged as well.
Yeah.
Like, some of them I'm getting bored with now, and I find myself kind of skipping around.
Right.
And it wasn't until Full of War when I realized, like,
I don't think I've ever even listened to that.
dude, like I said, from start to finish, incredible.
Yeah.
It is easily the best thing that they've put out, hands down. And the album that they put out afterwards, they released like 3 original songs, 3 covers, and then just acoustic versions. Like that doesn't even count, even though one of my favorite Condition songs is actually on that album. But Full of War has 2 of what I think are the best written songs ever.
Yeah.
Walking Separate Ways, which is the very opening song. I think that song is perfect. And you know how I feel about opening songs on albums.
They're everything.
Yeah. I've just completely blanked on my favorite song.
That's okay.
Yeah. So anyway, there's like 2 songs on that album that I think are the best of all time. And they're so well written. And obviously they just produced the sound that I've been into very much. We talked about Secret and Whisper, Seosin, and other bands that, they're not as great, but like Ivory Line.
I've always categorized that music genre, and this has been much debated about, but even before I ever dug deep into it, I would always categorize those bands as power pop bands because they're aggressive. They tap into metal a little bit just with how their guitar work is done, but their songwriting is very pop oriented. You said it, Seosin, Conditions, Secret and Whisper, Amberlin, Acceptance.
Like, in layman's terms, it's just like melodic rock and a high-pitched screamer. Or singer,
yeah.
Excuse me. And
just straightforward songwriting versus choruses,
right.
bridges, yeah.
Exactly. And that was sort of the pattern. That was sort of the music that always spoke to me. But like
with like really intense guitar leads.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah. And I just loved the look of that band too, because they all look like bros.
Their singer is Jack. He used to be in a band called Scarlet, who is like heavily influential on the band that I was in. So
he also, of all those genres we've talked about, he's also, I think, just one of the best singers.
I agree. He could literally do it live. He was fantastic.
Yes. Like, well, we'll talk about some other bands like that later. But yeah, I think that this album is incredible, and I really urge you to check it out. Best Mistake is the other song that I love on it. Best Mistake, and just brilliant. It encapsulates everything that I love about that genre, and easily the best thing that they've put out. And I think that every single person listening to this podcast, every single person would love this album. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of music you're into. You will think that this is a great rock album.
I have a feeling Brando would pick it apart just because he's.
I think Brando is gonna judge my entire list
probably
because I'm me, and that's fine. That's fine.
You guys go way back.
Yeah,
we both do.
Oh, that's fine. He's well. I'll talk about that later.
Oh, he has Revival Sound on your list?
No.
Okay. My number 3 is the only full-length album this band has ever put out. It's Beloved, their album Failure On. This album is so good. It came out in like 2003, maybe. It's still great. It's still amazing. Not only is it still great and still amazing, it is a recipe that a lot of people in the music genre that know about this band, they hold this album in a very high regard, and they will cite it as an influence, but nobody can get the recipe right. This is when I first heard Under Oath for the first time, and I thought, wow, this screaming with singing as well is great. I always thought to myself, it would be, and bands do this more now, but it would be great if there were more bands that sang 90% of the time and screamed 10% of the time. This band did that. Not only did they do it, but like their breakdowns, holy shit, they're fucking good. My God, I used to love it when people would bring the mosh, and this band brought the mosh. And their vocalist just had this this was at a time, and still to this day, a lot of the more metalcore, screamo, post-hardcore music genres, their vocals are what people would categorize as a little emo, a little high-pitched and whiny from time to time. Beloved didn't have that.
Yeah.
Their singer, Josh Moore, had a very, not gravelly voice, but a voice that I would associate more with like alternative rock or just radio rock in general. And it was incredibly appealing, so much so that on their last show DVD, they did a cover of My Hero by Foo Fighters, and it just made sense. Like it just did in every way, shape, or form. This is one of the first bands that I also ever saw that had 3 guitar players. And it was also one of the first bands that I ever saw where I like really paid attention to how much of an atmosphere guitar could make, because this is a band that they were a rock band. They had these breakdowns, but the third guitar would also play these like really beautiful parts in songs. And I was just like, everything that I knew of this music genre was transformed because it was just so beautiful. Like there's a song by them called Death to Traitors, which has one of the best mosh parts in the entire song. But the entire end of the song is just this gorgeous, like sweeping guitar, almost solo. It's so beautiful. And they're just people that I stumble upon all the time that have like, I remember one day, one of the first times I ever bonded with the drummer of Gwen Stacy was because I made a joke about wanting to buy his Beloved hoodie off of him. And we just talked about Beloved for like an hour. One of the most heartbreaking things is when this band broke up. First of all, this band was so respected. Listen to the bands that they had play their last show. Norma Jean. Under Oath.
Jesus.
And I think, who was the last band? I think Hope's Fall at the time. But, I mean, this was, they're only chasing safety Under Oath.
Yeah,
this was
yeah.
Norma Jean immediately after Bless a Martyr, Kiss a Child. Like, huge.
Massive.
And one of the most heartbreaking things is they're from North Carolina. They played their final show in North Carolina. I was in North Carolina at church camp during their last show. And I thought about how I could leave to go to this show. But it's great. You can actually watch their entire last
church camp.
You can actually watch their entire last show on YouTube.
Is it good quality?
It's great. It's good quality in terms of it. It's good quality. It's a multi-camera. They put it out as a DVD. The sound could be better, but it's great, man. And they actually just did the podcast Labeled, put out by Tooth and Nail. They actually just did a small little segment on bands that broke up too soon. This was one of those bands, man. I mean, they had booked a tour with Coheed and Cambria. And I think Coheed and Cambria and Thursday, when they announced their breakup, like that's a huge tour for a band like that. Love this band. And one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved with Brave the Storm to begin with, because you guys reminded me of Beloved. And I hear bands today that I can hear influence from Beloved.
You know that no one ever turned me on to Beloved? Like I was never around anyone who listened to them, at least to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until...
Talk about a crossover band for people. Shit.
It wasn't until... I started to get to know you and hearing you talk about back in the days when you recommended Conditions. I remember Beloved and Thursday being what Jaye Williams was about. Like, yes.
Okay.
I heard you talk about those bands quite a bit. And
I love Thursday. I think they're a little overrated.
You were, I mean, you were into Thursday.
Oh, 100%.
Much more than you are now.
100%.
I was going to say, I strictly remember that about you. But yeah, nobody ever got me into Beloved. And if you played me a Beloved song, I wouldn't know what it was.
Right.
Yeah. But
one of the bonds that I have with, why does John keep coming up on this podcast? One of our common bonds.
Beard guy.
One of our funniest jokes, we will just randomly text each other and say, did you hear? We will just text each other and say, did you hear Beloved's getting back together? Just randomly, we'll just say that to each other.
I have one of those jokes with my friends group. I'll say, hey, did you guys hear about Kobe?
Who's Kobe?
No.
Kobe who?
No, just say no what?
No, what?
He died last night in his LA home.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard that joke before. One other really random bit of news or a bit of factoids about Beloved. Drummer went on to start Advent like immediately after quitting the band. Great band. Also, their guitar player ended up being in Dead Poetic, and
Oh, really?
and also that the Almost. So yeah, just everywhere.
You piqued Eric's interest there.
Yeah, I feel like he would have known that. Anyways, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is maybe a punt. Actually, I know for a fact it's not a punt, but this is the first time you'll be on the same page with me because
Okay.
I don't think you give a shit about my other 2 choices. No Hope by The Color Morale.
It's definitely not on my list, but I do think it's a incredible album. So incredible. In fact, I might be doing a more than music about it.
So it's definitely the best Color Morale album.
Hands down.
It's Color Morale is one of my favorite bands.
Can I tell you a quick funny thing about that album real quick?
Sure.
Randomly went to their Spotify page the other day, and when you go to a band's Spotify page, they typically have their most recent release at the top for you to pick. Even though they've had 2 albums out since that came out, it's still the top album.
Is it really?
It's
That's
like
great.
The album. They're like, hey, people listen to this.
Yeah. The Color Morale is one of the most like long lasting bands from this genre. Right. Like when I gave up, when I gave up with every other band, I was still listening to the Color Morale. Like they just kind of outlasted everybody, and they did come along later, but they just piqued my interest more so. Another band like that. I mean, I stuck with Our Last Night for a long time, even though I've fallen off of them. But yeah, they were one of the last bands I listened to in this genre. But No Hope came out. And it's funny, and I have no problem making fun of myself here, but it's like, it's hilarious how, that album is obviously like hopecore. And it's not only is about the loss of Garrett's faith, because up until that point, Color Morale was recognized as a Christian band. He talked a lot about the loss of his faith. He was like anti-God. He cussed for the first time. And that was a big deal if you were a fan of the Color Morale, when you sort of hear one of your, faithful heroes losing their faith. I mean, that's very interesting in music, at least to me it is. So not only did that album kick me in the nuts in the way that it was new for Color Morale, but it came along at a time when like I was one of those people, I consider myself one of those people that needed that hope core.
Right.
And it came along.
You had a connection with it.
Yeah. And it came along at a time in my life when I was very depressed and I was going through one of the first and worst bouts of anxiety that lasted a long time. And I used to listen to that album. Well, that's not true. The album had been out for a while, but it got to a point where I needed that album. And I would listen to it when I would do things like just hit my punching bag.
Yeah.
Like when I just wanted to like let off a bunch of steam, I would blare that album. I would also play that album in the car to myself and drive around and just cry to it.
Right.
Like this album was very pivotal to me, and I just spent a lot of time with it. I've spent a lot of time with all these albums, but that's just how I would describe it. I spent a lot of time with this album, and this album spent a lot of time with me. And but at the same time, it's also just great song after great song, and they all have their like unique spins. Like Living Breathing Something is a very interesting song, and it's not traditional in the way that Conditions writes traditional rock music, and there's just a lot of interesting things. And as far as the band goes, it was a great chapter in their discography.
Their most successful chapter.
100%. It got them on the map, even though
that's supported by numbers.
Yeah, and they were already kind of big to me. Like I was already paying attention. I still love the album in front of that,
right?
But this obviously blew them up to where they were embraced by so many more people.
Yeah, I joked about it, but you guys will hear a lot more of my thoughts. I want to get you involved in it too when I do more of the music on the band, because I think it's a fascinating thing, specifically for me too. This is a band that I've known about for a really, really long time. Didn't give 2 shits about them. Just did not care about their first 2 albums. I've talked a lot before about the dark period of me in music. This was one of the bands that broke through during that period.
Yeah.
The first time I heard this album, my reaction to it was, I haven't heard an album executed like this since They're Only Chasing Safety. That's how high of a regard I hold this album. It's phenomenal. It's unbelievably good. It is executed almost to perfection for the music genre that it is, in my opinion. How it's written, how everything about it, and there's so many funny like nuances to this. Like, so this album came out when I started a soccer group that I was really, really involved with, and I developed a superstition around this album. Do you know about this?
I don't think so.
For whatever reason, I would play this album. There's a bar that we'd watch these soccer games at called West 6th, and it's like a 15-minute drive from my house to this bar, and I would, for every game for an entire tournament, I would listen to this album and air drum to it going to the games.
I think I've heard of this.
We did not lose one game that entire tournament. And
that's great.
Yeah, it's just it had a superstition beyond it, and it lasted for a long time. I think still to this day, anytime I drive to watch one of those games, I think I still listen to it. I have it burned on a CD in my car specifically. It's a fantastic album, and if anybody is a fan, even a semi-fan or was a fan of this genre of music, I would highly recommend that you check this out. They have a whole story after the fact that is equally as fascinating, but we'll get more into that.
It's also really cool because that's also the first album where he changed his scream.
Yes.
And I think
one of the reasons I picked up on it so much.
Another thing that I think works so well is that the album evolves from the beginning to end. So the first few songs at the top are the most in your face and dark and heavy, and it starts to slowly transition as you get through the middle. It becomes more melodic, and then it just becomes happier and sounding happier and happier and happier. And then there's like not a single heavy song on the second half of the album. So it slowly evolves over time, and I think that works so well. And I mean, like, it gets to the point, the song I mentioned earlier, Living, Breathing Something, I mean, that song sounds like a horror movie. And like, I don't even know how else to describe it. Like, if you hear it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like the synth lead in it sounds like Freddy or Jason are walking around about to kill people with a knife. I mean, it's like so weird and specific, but yeah, it's
the song Save Yourself on that album is a masterpiece in how
you just perked Eric's ears up.
Music like that is written. Like, it really is. The way that it goes into this really epic singing part towards the end that stands on its own. That is one key thing about that album, especially compared to their last albums. In terms of how they're structured, the singing and screaming is kind of a mess. Like, they kind of just like, oh, just whenever. We're just going to do this whenever. The singing parts on this album are way more isolated.
Yeah.
And they're natural, so much so to the albums after this, it seemed like they tried to purposefully recreate it, and it just came across not great.
When they released that first single, Learned Behavior,
yeah,
and I still think this, but I remember, it's just so funny because this was before the album came out. I remember thinking, this might be one of the worst Color Morale songs ever.
Really?
Yeah, and the more I realize it, it's because I think the chorus is legitimately horrible.
Really? I love the chorus. I think it's smart. Yeah, I think it's great.
I just think it's so clunky, and I think it's genuinely bad.
It's actually a really intricate melody. Like, the way the melody...
I'm fine with the way it finishes. Sometimes it's good.
I mean, it's intricate how it develops. It's yeah, regardless. Yeah, great pick. I have a great admiration for that. There would be no way in hell I would ever put it on top of a list for me. But that's just, I know. Yeah. My number 2, an album I feel like not enough people know about, and it makes me sad. It's Ben Howard's I Forget Where We Were.
Okay.
I've said this before.
Why are you being weird right now?
Because Ryan Snelling, this album is I've said it before. This album is the closest thing to perfect that I've ever heard. It transcends a grade. I never got an opportunity to review it, and that makes me sad.
You still can.
This is an artist who broke big on an album that I don't think is particularly that great. It's very run-of-the-mill singer-songwriter.
What's the album?
It's called I Forget Where We Were.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
His first album was really big. It's like Jack Johnson-esque and all this stuff. This album is such a different idea from that. There are parts in this album that just sonically, not talking about his lyrics or anything like that, that are just so dark sounding that it comes out of nowhere how this album comes in so dark and literally digs itself up out of a grave to become just gorgeous and beautiful and atmospheric. And just all of the songs, even though they are pretty straightforward singer-songwriter types of songs, his decisions to do certain things on it are just executed to perfection. There are times when I listen to this, and I've heard you talk about this, about music and movies and things, and I don't get like this a lot, but when you hear something and you legitimately cannot fathom how someone could create something this good. That is how I feel about this.
Yes.
This album is transformative to me. It will immediately shift whatever I'm doing to a different place. It creates that much of an atmosphere. The sequencing of it is important. His vocals are gorgeous in it too. It is everything happens at the right moment, at the right time, in the right way and shape or form. It is also a very accessible album. Like, I'm talking about it like it's this crazy avant-garde thing. It's not. Like, that's another brilliant thing about it.
I think I've actually heard some songs from this because they've appeared in things, right?
I don't know.
I feel like I heard some of these songs because they were in a movie or a TV episode of some kind.
I don't know. It's strange.
So I recognize it.
It's strange because I'm telling you, man, like the opening notes of the album.
Would I freak out?
I don't know.
Would it get to me?
I think if you sat with it, I think if you listen to this album on your way home tonight, it would move you.
Okay.
I legitimately do, especially in the setting of driving home late at night.
Right.
The opening notes on this album make me sad because I'm like, I want every single thing that I ever create to seem like this.
Sure.
They're like these notes that it's like a delayed guitar. I don't know. I can't. It's hard for me to talk about. Like, it's just so good.
For one, I understand it completely. I know exactly what it's like to be someone who's made music and just listened to an album or a song and been like, God damn, I wish I came up with that.
Right.
You know, I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah, it's beyond words. Kayla and I share like a moment with this song with this album because we both kind of, even though she owns the first Ben Howard album on vinyl, and I think we sort of listened to this together and our minds were just blown by it. It's something that I wish more people would spend time with. It's also fascinating. Like Cody Ray Hecker got excited because I got into Ben Howard because he also liked Ben Howard.
Yeah.
But everybody I know that likes Ben Howard has, for whatever reason, never heard this album. They're just like...
It's his most recent album, isn't it?
It is.
2014.
2014, which is also a testament to how big that first album was. That first album broke through to like a lot of college rock kids, like Dave Matthews fans and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then he puts out this other thing that's just so different and dark and eerie and moody. This is also a weird guy who's very, very successful and would rather go surfing for 5 years than put out another album. He just started a new band and he plays in the back. He doesn't even sing.
That's different.
He plays guitar in the background.
Is Kayla about to come home? I have this
know.
eerie sense.
I don't know. Let me see. She just texted me. No, she's sending me pictures of tattoos.
Okay, very good. You ready for my number 2?
Hit me.
Hybrid Theory, Linkin Park.
Amazing album. Amazing album. I mean, we talked about this album before.
Uh-huh.
But the only thing I can say right now about that album is that album came out at a time when that genre of music was already sort of like, okay, people are getting tired of it. And then they were like, oh shit, you can do this too. People are just now figuring out how special the songwriting was on that music.
Think about, that's interesting just because I didn't live that way.
Yeah.
It was my introduction to it all.
Right.
But when you think of it the way you put it, think of how many bands owe it to Linkin Park for that. Like,
Yeah.
thank you, Linkin Park, for breathing new life into our genre, and just so many other bands. Like,
Right.
they realized that they could do things like this, and I think that we're even like we're seeing it happen again, but in a different cycle. Like bands, we talked a
100%.
whole lot about how Bring Me the Horizon is entering like a Linkin Park type phase when you consider like it's fascinating, and they are one of the last remaining true like rock god bands.
Well, think about what you just said right there. The whole Bring Me the Horizon entering a Linkin Park phase. What that means and the reason it's taken so long for this to happen. We see this happen over and over again with music. Anytime somebody becomes big and does something, it's like they pick out the wrong thing to focus on. Like at the time when Linkin Park became big, it was like, oh, let's have a singer and a rapper.
Yeah.
People don't give a fuck about that. It was the aesthetic and the style that Linkin Park brought to the table, like infusing rock with electronic music. That is just now happening more to a T today.
Right.
However many years later.
And so much about what I said about Fight Club. Hybrid Theory is my Fight Club when it comes to music because
it's your number one.
It was
Is it your number two? I'm sorry.
It's my number two.
Yeah.
But it's the album that got me. It is literally responsible for who I am today, just like Fight Club is. Like what my preferences are, my passions and everything. It's like I owe it all to that album. I wouldn't have been in a band if it wasn't for that album or for that band. And
right.
I thought a lot about it, and because it was kind of like back and forth, like, is it this or Meteora? I think that this is the better album. And obviously it was the first album that I ever listened to. And just, again, there's a whole lot that I've already said elsewhere. We did like an entire Linkin Park retrospective thing earlier this year, but it was, again, I've said it before, but it was a kick in the nuts.
Every single song on that album is not just good, they're bangers.
Yes.
Every single song are bangers.
And, obviously this started this whole thing. Mike Shinoda was my obsession for a long time. He's one of my favorite musicians. I just think he's so interesting and capable and talented. I mean, he's a jack of all trades when it comes to music, and
they were the definitive gateway band.
Yes,
for so many people. We talked about that though.
Yeah, and I just I am who I am because of Linkin Park. I mean, that sounds silly, but because of that album, and it's just sort of like the Dark Knight. I mean, I think everything that can be said about that album has been said, but it's huge.
Yeah, we're talking about it on a night where they're doing the memorial for Chester Bennington. Such a shame that we couldn't watch it or partake in it. I'm sure we will in some way, shape, or form. I'm sure there'll be videos of it and whatnot. But yeah, such a tragic loss in general. But the legacy that he leaves behind and just that band leaves behind is immense in music in general.
Absolutely.
My number one, again, shouldn't come to a surprise as people if you paid attention, but it's Deja Entendu by Brand New. When we talk about things that meant something to me, no album, I've said it before when we talked about Brand New, but it literally got me through high school. Every single week that I spent with this album, I would discover a new song and discover a new way that it defined meaning in whatever, in my life at the time. And it's just the first time I really remember having that moment. Like, I remember my parents used to take me to the lake all the time, and I would at night going to bed listening to the song and like figuring a way to interpret a certain Brand New song to have meaning to whatever I was going through at that time as a teenager. And yeah, man, it's just it was just a really, really special album, not just to me, but for a lot of people in general. And I've said it before, but different Brand New albums represent different people's time or different times in people's lives. And yeah, man, I just love it. It's also an album that's, again, very, very dynamic. I mean, there's like whole stretches of that album that are just like acoustic songs, or that like the song Sick Transit Gloria, or maybe it might be another song on that album that are more like a post-hardcore song, like where they'll scream from time to time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great album. I mean, I know you connect to it yourself.
I do. I do love it. It's one of those like seasonal albums that I've talked to you about recently.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't spend as much time with it anymore. I'll be honest.
And like Play Crack the Sky. I've told you about it before. That's a song that I always listen to before bed, and it would just
my second favorite song of all time.
It would take me to another place. It's such a gorgeous song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. So many memorable lines as well. It's just so well written, and it's just fun because like music doesn't sound like that anymore.
Yeah,
in my opinion, like not only is Brand New. I mean, there are other bands similar to Brand New, but I don't know. I think that sound is just totally lost now. Like I don't remember the last time I heard something that was like, this sounds like Deja Entendre.
There is a band called Moose Blood that's around now. They're actually a pretty big band out of England that really does tap into
this album.
Sort of, yeah, sort of. A lot of people are more musically influenced, I think, by Devil and God than this, but
yeah,
just the sound in general has kind of moved on, I think, a little bit. But hey, man, I don't really have much more to say about it.
How often do you listen to this album?
I actually don't listen to it that often anymore. A lot of it has to do, again, with the fact that I associate it so much more with adolescence.
Yeah,
that it's hard for me to listen to now, just because like I can't relate to it as much. I've literally defined those songs for a specific time in my life.
Yeah,
and I've grown up. You know, I spend more time listening to an album like Daisy or Devil and God now, just because aesthetically it's more associated with what I listen to right now.
Yeah,
like Daisy and Devil and God sound more like Balance and Composure.
And that's interesting just because in that way they grew up with you.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting.
Oh, 100%.
They're your Harry Potter when it comes to
music. Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, the band has only put out 5 fucking albums. So it's like when that album came out, like 2003, I think, or maybe earlier than that. I don't know. Maybe 2004. But yeah, I know what your number one is, but let's get to it.
My number one, there's a reason. When me and Brando used to hang out, his nickname for me was Seosin Boy.
That's also one of the only things that I've associated with you over our entire friendship.
My number one album is Seosin's self-titled album, Seosin. It was their debut full length. And
great album.
Jay?
Yeah.
Came out in 2006.
It did. Great year for music.
I have never, ever stopped listening to this album.
It's great.
Every year comes around, I go through the cycle of, I'm going to be obsessed with this album again. And I enjoy it just like I've heard it for the very first time. It hasn't aged yet. Like, there's not a moment on that album where I listen to it and like, oh, that part's kind of aged, or that part I don't care for anymore. From front to back, how I've described so many albums on this list, banger. I have to listen to every song. Depending on the day, I can't decide which one is my favorite.
It's the Drakes. If you're reading this, it's too late of post-hardcore.
It's just so punchy. And like I said, I think I know we could talk about how special the sound of Hybrid Theory was and hearing that for the first time, but Seosin, that sound is like something that's
iconic.
I didn't get into a whole lot of other new metal bands. Like Linkin Park is the only one I needed, but
it shaped a niche.
Seosin was like, and Amberlin had been out, but like I hadn't listened to Amberlin yet. So
I'll get into this a little bit.
So Seosin for me was my entry, much like Linkin Park was. Seosin was my entry into it informed me of so many other bands that came afterwards. Like the reason why I love Seosin. The reason why or Secret or Whisper, Ivory Line, some of these other bands that I took to. Ivory Line's not that great, but I liked a lot of their first songs. But Conditions as well. I mean, everything. I wanted so badly to be Cove Reaper.
Right.
I can't sing.
Cove Reaper wanted so bad to be Anthony Green.
I can't sing, but I always tried because of him, even though, his voice is astronomically different than mine, and I was never going to be able to do what he could do. But I tried so hard to be Cove, and I thought like him when I tried to come up with singing parts, and I never really got there when it came to Brave the Storm. But like eventually I got to sing on one of my songs years later, and the first person I thought of when writing my singing parts was Cove Reaper. It was what would Cove Reaper do?
Well, of course.
And this band is just literally everything, or this album is literally everything to me. And this is the album that I referenced and why I didn't want to do favorite bands.
Yeah.
Because Seosin has my favorite album of all time. They're not in my top 5 favorite bands.
Right.
Because everything else that they've put out has been inferior to this. And I just...
It's tough to live up to, in fairness.
It's even the stuff before, though. Like, I
Right.
like 7 Years. I like some of the stuff they did on those EPs. But it's not on the same level. And I know that there's some, like, Anthony Green sales and purists out there.
Yeah.
It's not on the same level.
We've moved on.
And we've also seen what happens when Anthony Green comes back to sales.
Some people love that, but I mean, let's be honest. It was a trip down memory lane that just didn't need to happen. We have Circa Survive. It's fine.
Like I said before about Conditions, I think that anybody listening to this would love this Seosin album. I mean, Bury Your Head, You're Not Alone. I mean, come on. Voices, some of it's just so energetic all the time and big and loud, and talk about
just
that.
Accessible too.
Yes.
Straightforward, very accessible.
And anyway, I mean, maybe it's been 11 years since this came out, and maybe you've heard some things similar to this, but since then, but I think that it's still a very special sound that hasn't been able to been replicated, particularly by the very same band.
So the funny thing about Seosin and what's fascinating is, and we talked about this a little bit when we did when we reviewed the comeback album with Anthony Green on In the Galaxy, but Seosin represents something completely different to me than it does for you. Just I think from our age perspective, Seosin, this album was the butt of jokes to a lot of people. Not because of what it ended up being, but because of what it represented. I always made the joke of, and there's some people that'll get this, but I always made the joke that this Seosin album was the post-hardcore version of Chinese Democracy. Chinese Democracy is an infamous Guns N' Roses album that was promised years and years before it ever came out. People were waiting for it. When is Chinese Democracy coming out? When is Chinese Democracy coming out? By the time it did come out, it was too late. That's not obviously what happened with Seosin, but Seosin, when that white EP came out with Anthony Green, nobody had ever heard anything like that. This was like post-hardcore singing was like, it was like people, they're trying their hardest. Like, I mean, Thursday was a great band, but let's be honest, not the greatest singing in the world. Taking Back Sunday, not the greatest singing in the world. But Anthony Green could fucking sing. And this band they were playing some aggressive music with it. But everybody was like, I mean, they were such a hot property. So much of a hot property that their first album came out on a major label.
Yes.
It just didn't happen for a lot of bands. Like
exactly. And
it took Thrice like 3 albums to put an album out.
That's another thing that's so fascinating. I mean, you can debate that Anthony's a better singer.
Yeah.
And like maybe live. Like when it comes to singing live, Anthony's the better singer.
I think so much different.
Anthony has the more annoying voice, I think. And
he also couldn't write a chorus to save his life.
Cove's songs are just better.
Oh, 100%.
You can say that you don't like Cove as much as Anthony Green.
Right.
His songs are just better. Forget about it. But it's the fact that, yeah, Cove was, the whole band was produced by Capitol and a very well-respected producer and Howard
100%.
Benson. And it's like, that was just a huge, and I don't remember that album. The way you described it, that's not how I remember it.
Right.
I mean, I always remember it as...
It was years before. I mean, I'm talking like early 2000s, like when people were, whenever that EP came out. I mean, there was a long distance of time between when that album came out and they had that pop of hype to when that, I mean, Circa put out an album before Seosin put out a full-length album.
I just remember that album turning heads. I just remember everyone going, holy shit.
Right.
And I was around a lot of musician friends as well that were like just glorifying that behind the scenes DVD that came out with that album. And like,
I remember how big of a deal it was when they put out that Black EP, which was a follow up to the White EP.
That's what 7 Years is on.
The Bury Your Head was the first single that came out. I remember
that's what it was. Yeah,
I remember the music video dropping on Fuse and it being such a big deal. Actually got to see Seosin live before the album came out, following along with all these leaked songs that were coming off of it. And yeah, man, it was just such a fascinating band. That's a band you could do probably a More Than Music on too.
I want everyone to listen to that album.
I think you should. It legitimately is a really good album.
If you've never heard it and you have no idea, if you don't even know what word we're saying, Seosin.
Right. Not Saison, not the beer.
Definitely go check out. It's the one with the purple beetle on it.
Is it purple? This is a shiny black beetle.
It's a purple beetle.
Okay.
The dark purple. Deep purple.
Like the band. Yeah, Seosin's fascinating. Feel good about our music conversation.
Okay, good.
I think we're going to be crossing a lot of streams here going into TV, though.
No.
I think we're definitely going to be. Let's take one more break, and we'll get into our TV discussion.
Okay.
The Sight and Sound YouTube page is the place to be. We always appreciate you checking out all the content we put out here on our podcast feed, but there is a ton of supplementary content in addition to what we talk about here. I'm over there doing album reviews for all the latest album releases. Ryan has you covered with movie news, reactions, and reviews. And from time to time, we even do television reactions in addition to original content that honestly is just meant to entertain you. Go to the description box of this podcast, click the link for the YouTube channel, and subscribe for even more Sight and Sound goodness.
As soon as you went to break, I realized that you were absolutely right. I guarantee I have no idea what your list is. I guarantee we have 3 of the 5 same shows.
Yeah.
Guarantee it. I have a question before we get started.
Okay, please.
And I don't want you to answer verbally. I want you to just shake your head yes or no, and I will not react verbally.
Okay.
I'm just curious. Our audience won't have any idea what either of our answers are until we reveal it in our list. Nod your head yes or no. Is Game of Thrones on your list? Okay, here's my answer.
Okay.
I was just curious. I thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, so if we're addressing, this was the easiest list for me personally to make, and if we're talking about how we're interpreting the list, this one is legitimately like, this is not only do I hold these in high regards for me personally, I just legitimately think like these are some of the best shows, period. Like these are ones that I would legitimately debate with people, not necessarily the order, but these 5 shows I think are fucking great and everybody should watch them. No questions asked. The other ones people might be like, oh, I don't care for 500 Days of Summer or Jerry Maguire's. I get all that.
Another thing that I did personally is that I made sure that all of my shows were finished.
Me too. Yeah.
And maybe that gave away the Game of Thrones thing.
Well, regardless, like here's another one I didn't. This is something completely separate. I did not take into consideration any TV shows that were single standalone seasons. Like I love
True Detective, Night of.
I love True Detective. I love Night of. I love Big Little Lies. Not eligible.
The other thing, this one is particularly difficult because not only do I want to make sure that they're finished, but there's just so many I'm not caught up on. Like I've seen the majority of Sons of Anarchy, and people are going to be like, "Sons of Anarchy isn't on your list."
No,
I'm not done,
guys.
I'm not done. But that's one of many examples.
I couldn't even entertain that. I like Sons of Anarchy, and I have but I've always said Sons of Anarchy is kind of a guilty pleasure. I think some of the acting on that show is terrible. Like, and I think some of the storylines.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then there's a lot of shows that I just like really, really enjoy. Like, I use the term empty calories. There's a lot of shows like Entourage.
Mm-hmm.
I love that show.
Right.
It doesn't age well. As seasons go on, it gets worse. Show like Californication, I love a lot.
I didn't finish it,
but it gets worse at the end. Yeah. It kind of suffers the same thing. But there are so many shows that I hold in high regard for particular reasons, and TV is just a much more interesting discussion, I think, than music and movies, just because it evolves. Like the way that a band evolves, one TV show can evolve, and I just think it's fascinating. And again, there's obviously so much, and it's harder to catch up on, and so there's a lot of things that I've omitted.
With all but one of these, 4 of my 5 have a legitimate bad season,
Okay.
and that's fascinating.
Yeah. Me too. Am I going?
Yeah, you start off.
Number 5, The Office.
Not on my list.
Okay.
A show that I felt sort of petered out. I feel like
It
you could have
does.
stopped as soon as Michael Scott left the show.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that not every show has this problem. There are
Right.
times when shows can evolve and change when one of their biggest stars leaves, and
that's not to say the rest of the cast isn't fantastic.
I think the show is entirely what centered around Michael Scott,
Right.
and that dynamic was crucial. His back and forth with everyone is what that show is built on. Not that there are Dwight, outstanding character. There are characters that stand on their own, but ultimately I thought it was all about that environment that Michael Scott caused. And I could tell when they were experimenting with other actors, like when Will Ferrell kind of came in.
Yeah.
As much as people love Will Ferrell, I'm seeing Will Ferrell on The Office, and I'm thinking, he's not Michael Scott.
Or James, what's his name? What's the guy's name that played Ultron?
James Spader.
Yeah.
He's one of the worst characters in The Office.
Yeah, well, the other
Robert
thing,
California. You have, I don't know what the hell that character is.
Yeah,
and
who thought that was going to be a good idea?
It wasn't. It was not good. The past 2 seasons of The Office, I ignore.
Right.
But season 1 through 7, I have binged that so many times.
Yeah.
The Office,
so much rewatchability factor.
There are 2 shows on my list that have insane rewatchability.
Right.
And The Office is just a show that if you can't find anything on Netflix, The Office I go to, and this is the show I'm putting on. I'm going to have a great time with this. I'm going to laugh like I've never seen it before. I genuinely think The Office is one of the most influential shows of all time.
100%. I use Michael Scott, his character, and as a measuring stick to other comedies, because like a show like Silicon Valley to me is constantly defeatist. Like it's constantly you're laughing at the expense of somebody else.
Yeah.
Whereas Michael Scott, has a lovability factor to him, and he has characteristics about him that are rewarding. Like he is good at his job at the end of the day. And, a lot of shows just aren't smart enough to really figure that out. We're just constantly laughing at the expense of the people we're watching.
Right. And it was able to be fearless as a network comedy, and I think that sort of paved the way now. And we're exploring different things with like Blackish. Like that's a really but
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Well, yes, but that's not what I was speaking to. But
Right.
You're right. And comedies after The Office, and The Office wasn't the first. I mean, hell, the British Office was the first to kind of do the single cam and the mockumentary kind of thing. And Arrested Development, I think it was actually out before The Office.
Yes.
But without a doubt, The Office is what popularized it.
Right.
And that's why we have the shows that we do now. It destroyed the traditional 3-camera sitcom. And
it also just developed one of the most fascinating things about The Office, and I'm just now thinking about this, it developed incredibly interesting and captivating storylines beyond the jokes.
Yes.
And it's crazy how developed these characters were, and we rarely saw them either outside of The Office or away from each other.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I knew all the ins and outs and intricacies of Dwight Schrute.
Yeah. I think Michael Scott is one of the greatest character creations of all time.
Yeah.
Not only the idea of Michael Scott, the things that you can do with a character like Michael Scott, the fact that he's oblivious, he's ignorant, he says insensitive, racist, sexist remarks, and it doesn't do anything because it's the commentary of this guy is oblivious.
Yeah.
And everyone else is reacting to the camera exactly how you would react. And in that show, can't be touched.
Yeah.
Because that's the approach. I love that. Dwight Schrute, amazing character. Phenomenal. This show has some of the best, interesting, creative characters I've ever seen on any show ever.
Yeah.
Again, the rewatchability and just, I love it. I just think it's so important and crucial and goddamn funny.
I agree 100%. It was in consideration 100%. Some of the other shows on the list I had a more stronger, not necessarily a stronger connection with, because I probably spent more time with The Office than almost any other show, with the exception of a few others. But yeah, it's a great show.
Yeah.
My number 5 is 6 Feet Under. Show I feel like not enough people have watched, a show that's regarded as a very great show.
HBO OG.
Absolutely. And this was one of the first HBO shows that I ever really, really fell in love with. Like, I never really got into Sopranos, never got into The Wire or Oz, anything like that. But I love 6 Feet Under. It's very difficult for me to give you like the sales pitch about what this show actually is, because this is a show that will make you laugh. It will make you laugh at death and uncomfortable things, but it will also make you cry. I mean, it's a show about a family and the things that happen with the families, or with the family around this this funeral home. But also, it has the ability to take you down these almost strange other side storylines with all of the different bodies that come in there. It sort of tells stories about them.
Yeah.
And also, there's like these weird, you remember watching Full House back in the day, and every Full House episode had like a lesson in it?
Of course.
Yeah, it sort of has that about it too, which is kind of funny. Some incredible performances on this thing. Michael C. Hall, probably the most standout, plays a homosexual man before he played Dexter, and sort of in the closet for a lot of the show, and just dealing with that, and also his character living up to expectations and whatnot. A lot of great cameos in the show. The fact that you have this rotating door of just dead people and corpses on the show leaves the door open for a lot of cameos. It's just a great show that if it were on today, I feel like people would be watching every single week.
How many seasons are there?
I want to say there's 6 seasons, but this is back when even HBO shows were a lot longer, like longer seasons. Also, one of the best box set. I bought the box set. One of the best packaging I've ever seen. You literally get the box and it has fake grass on the bottom, and the DVDs are in the dirt, and it's great. Had it for a long time. I actually think I sold it to Half Price Books, and then I went back years later and saw it still sitting in Half Price Books, the exact same one, because it was torn on the side.
That's hilarious.
It's a great show. It does hold up. It's a little dated to a certain extent, but it's a show that I feel like people could go back and watch and enjoy. A lot of people have HBO Go.
It's dated
HBO
enough
Now.
to where like they all have flip phones, right?
Yeah, and it's dated enough to where it
Full screen?
It is full screen.
Maybe not now. Maybe not now.
That's actually,
they fixed Curb, so maybe they
maybe.
it.
But I think the last time I watched it, tried to rewatch it again, and it is. I've been able to rewatch it, but I think it did have the bars on the side. But it changes, obviously, past a certain point in time. It went widescreen. But yeah, it's just a great show, and I think I was happy to put it on my list because I know a lot of people haven't seen it. It was before HBO was really what it is now for television.
Sure.
So yeah, that's my number 5. What's your number 4?
This is our first matchup. Parks and Recreation.
That's also my number 4.
Okay.
So let's talk about it.
Let's do it. So,
how does a show like Parks and Recreation get above The Office, Ryan Snelling? I'm sure some people are wondering that. Right
well, it's funny because the show wanted to be The Office in the first season.
It tried to be.
It did. I mean, Leslie Knope was just Michael Scott,
Yep.
and it didn't work. I mean, it was enough.
Really didn't work.
It was enough to keep me interested. Like,
it was enough to keep me away. First season, watched episode 1 and said, "Nope, don't need this at all."
I was still interested. I
came back, like, I think the first season I watched live was the last season.
Okay.
Yeah.
Me too. Because I waited until they all came out on Netflix, but I was
Okay.
watching it while it was going on, but as it was on Netflix, so I
Gotcha.
wasn't that
Okay.
far behind. Did watch the last season live. We had 2 very fun Parks and Rec parties for the premiere and finale. So anyway, the thing about Parks and Rec that sort of transcends The Office, in my opinion, I think The Office might be more laugh out loud funny, but
Right.
what they were able to do with the characters, you have just as many great characters. You have
the best character writing on live television.
Yes.
The only time you can see characters done like this, there are recurring characters that show up in like season 2 that don't pop up again until season 4.
Yes.
The only other show that reminds me of that is The Simpsons, where they have, if you see the cast of The Simpsons that's recurring, it's this huge poster.
I think that this is probably the most live action Simpsons.
Yes.
Because and this is the best point. I think.
Seeing a character walk into a scene will make you laugh, like a John Ralphio.
Yes. John Ralphio floored me just from entering the scene every time.
Or the animal control people who are only in like a handful of episodes, like again, recurring people.
Yeah. So the thing that makes Parks and Rec stand out over The Office is that as a whole, it doesn't have that last 2 season problem.
Right.
It is the most compact, gets better and better as you watch it. But not only does it have those great characters, Ron Swanson, one of the greatest TV characters of all time, it also expands, like you said, the Simpson aspect is due to the fact that it's not just an Office commentary. It is community. It is local Parks and Rec. It is local government.
Small town.
It eventually becomes like commentary in our country, and it's political, and it's everything. It is literally a living, breathing, functioning world as a sitcom. And that's its biggest strength. Combine that with the strength of all the characters and the workplace and the way that it's filmed and the style with The Office. And it's just incredible. And Kayla's here, and
we're gonna have to pause. We'll be right back with Parks and Rec love. All right, so the dogs were freaking out. We had to pause, which is fine. But look, I've said this. I've gone on record as saying this, and I stand by it. I think Parks and Rec is, in my opinion, I think you might have another comedy on your list, but it is for me the best TV comedy to have existed, just because it's smart for everything that you said. It's smart for its commentary across many different spaces. Also, how well it balances its characters. I mean, I feel like we don't give enough credit to give enough credit to how difficult it is for a movie or television show to balance an immense amount of characters. When we talked about The Departed earlier, doing it so well. It's just a show that is so enjoyable. And its characters evolve and develop over time too. The Office does that same thing. I mean, and Aziz Ansari's character
Tom
develops so much over the seasons.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody maybe like what's her name? I'm forgetting her name. The girl that is her name Karen.
Karen Filippelli.
Yeah, like she didn't really develop that much. She kind of stays the exact same.
The only thing that really develops is her relationships and her occupation.
Yeah. Or
that's about it.
Or Andy in general developing over the years. I mean, pretty much stays the same, but just to follow his path of just somebody constantly looking for what his life goal is great.
Which is fascinating too, because when it comes to comedies, you don't typically want your characters to change.
Yeah.
And not that they
you have to find out new ways for them to be funny.
Like, honestly, like when The Office started to change characters, like I remember when Jim and Pam started fighting in the last season, I went, no.
Right, yeah.
I don't want this. Like, there's a comfort level to sitcoms that you expect. And so what's fascinating is that, yes, they do change, but it works so well, and it's just natural, and you appreciate it.
And one of the things that we learned from, I mean, I guess spoiler alert if you haven't watched the show, but one of the things that the first season did wrong was it made it, and we're going to talk about this more when we start our show for Season Syndrome, but Leslie Knope, she was the butt of the joke in the first season. That's the only time that happened. all she ever was great at her job. Like,
Yes.
great. And all she does is constantly succeed and constantly progress as a character. Again, another show to where you're not laughing at the expense of whatever's going on. Maybe the circumstances, but never because they're constantly failing. They're constantly fumbling over their own
And people
existence.
always want to support her as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that's her team. That everyone else on that show is her team.
Right. Yeah, it's a great show. It's
Yeah, I like the idea of it being a living, breathing thing. I liked how I said that.
good for you. My number 3, because we both did our number 4.
That means it's my turn.
Okay, go ahead.
Seinfeld.
Never seen it.
So I grew up watching this show. It is responsible for developing my sense of humor. This in the Late Show, but I didn't put the Late Show with David Letterman on my list. But yes, it's very much responsible. And it was like for a long time. Like I talked about how there's a particular show that got me into television. I was still watching Seinfeld before I got into television. And for a long time, I thought that that's all television was. I mean, for a long time, it was I came home from school, watched Nickelodeon, maybe a Full House, and Nick at Night.
Right.
But I watched Seinfeld with my dad late at night. And I remember this is, of course, back in the time with VHS. And like my grandparents used to tape Seinfeld. My dad used to tape Seinfeld, even though it was like the most rerun show in existence. It almost still is probably. It was just always, it was something that since my parents or my dad was paying attention to it, I knew that I was supposed to pay attention to this.
Right.
It was like one of the only things I've ever been informed from my parents in that way. And yeah, it just, again, the attitude and the personality of the show at the time was so singular, and I have mad respect for that. And that's something that I can speak to almost retrospectively, just because I've only learned that through time. But it's also just the fact that talk about people like Michael Scott and how iconic those Kramer. Jesus fucking Christ. There's not a single character like Kramer in existence. There's a lot of copycats out there. There's the Charlie Day on It's Always Sunny, and like that doesn't even really compare. And like the physical comedy that Michael Richards did. I mean, there's nothing like Kramer on television. George Costanza is an amazing character, and we just talked about Julia Louis-Dreyfus on our Emmy show. She's the queen of that show,
right?
And she doesn't have to be a woman. Like, and I say that in a good way because she goes toe to toe with all of those guys, and that there's not a better cast. Well, Parks and Rec might be a better cast, but it's hard to compare that cast to anyone else because they destroy it. And it changed the formatting of a sitcom forever. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld, I know it's a traditional 3-camera sitcom, but it was one of the first sitcoms to actually go out on the streets and film like inserts that were done out in public and on the streets and everything. And so that was very unique at the time. Talk about the side characters that come in and out.
Yeah.
Like you did in Parks and Rec. I mean, Seinfeld did that. There were so many people that come in and out. Our boy Bryan Cranston had an arc on that show, and it's very much like Parks and Rec in that way, where characters come in and out from season to season. So much, in fact, that's what their entire series finale was about, was bringing a whole bunch of characters back to interact with them for one last time. And so the comedy and the commentary, that attitude that the show has, that's the part that makes, not only is it the show about nothing, but that's what sort of informed my sense of humor. And so that it's very much just the show for Snelling. And in the way that I can listen to Seosin over and over again, I have never, ever, ever stopped listening or watching Seinfeld.
Right.
I've spent more time with Seinfeld than I've spent more time with anything as far as rewatching and re-listening, and I never, ever, ever tire of it. What's fascinating, the pattern that I've realized out of The Office and Parks and Rec and Seinfeld, they all have short and bumpy first seasons.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the next season, and then by season 3, they have turned into one of the best shows of all time. I find that fascinating. But yeah, that shows everything to me. I remember when it came out on Hulu, and it was like Christmas. It was like I had never seen those shows before, and I got to binge it over again.
Yeah, I think I don't have much of a take on Seinfeld other than my take on just TV comedies being so prevalent in both of our lists. Well, I guess more so in your list, but obviously having a place in my list is that I feel like it's a lot easier to make an impactful drama just because that is what it is. You know, drama is supposed to tug on your heartstrings, whatever. But a comedy is supposed to especially to have it in like an upper echelon, high critical acclaim. You have to be so smart to make a great comedy because it's easy to make an okay comedy. You know, like you just write fart jokes all day and it's not a big deal. But to have something that has some kind of effect on your daily life as a comedy is a special thing.
And to wrap up this section here, because this is my last comedy, I don't remember who said it, but it's always stuck with me, and this is how I've identified my taste to people, and why I don't care for a show about the Big Bang Theory. Where my opinion on a show like that is that it's a very dumb show about smart people. The constant with my shows are it's a very smart show about dumb people, and I think that you can just do so much more with that. And, you know, The Office is, in my opinion, the most influential show since Seinfeld.
Yeah.
All of those have in their own way paved the way for how television is made afterwards. And, yes.
I can understand that for sure. My number 3 is Friday Night Lights.
I thought it'd be higher.
Really?
Yeah.
3?
I thought it was going to...
You thought it was going to swap? Okay.
I thought it was going to be your number 1.
What? What? So Friday Night Lights is the best show, in my opinion, at what it does. So there are a lot of shows like Friday Night Lights where whether it's like a teen drama or it just even like a drama on network television, right? They have beats, they have cues, and Friday Night Lights has all of those. But it does it amazingly and fantastically. It does things that are tropey because again, that's what you come to expect from a show on network television like this. But there is a level of that sort of entertainment where you execute it so precisely and so effortlessly almost to where every single episode that I watch of that show really does affect me in some sort of way, whether it's me. First of all, I mean, just the fact that I grew up playing football is a thing. Football is so not a part of this show. I mean, I'm sorry. It's such a small part of this show. It's a big part in the sense where it shapes the world that they're living in 100%. But much like another show we might talk about later, it's easy to say the show is about football, but it's more about the people surrounding it. Whether it's, it's Dad, as I like to call him, basically taking in all these kids and shaping their lives and whatnot. I mean, there is so much for anybody to relate to in this show. And also the fact that you're essentially getting 2 television shows in one with this, because the last 2 seasons essentially completely starts the show over.
Yeah.
And that's difficult to do. And in any other circumstance, you could easily say that's when the show fell off. The Office did that when they really shifted gears. But the show maybe just got better. Like, it literally did get better. It brought Michael B. Jordan into our homes on a regular basis. It, Tim Riggins is kind of a meme now, which I think is hilarious.
It launched several careers.
Oh, 100%.
So many careers.
100%. And it's just a show that's so lovable. You take also into consideration the fact that, I joke about it all the time, but Explosions in the Sky, their choice of music on that show, it would be very easy for them to do something like Grey's Anatomy did, where every week they're trying to blow up the new song. I mean, the Fray essentially launched their career on the back of that show,
Yeah.
where a band like Explosions in the Sky, a completely instrumental band, all they are supposed to do is create an atmosphere. So much so to where the music of that show is synonymous just with like the landscape of Texas, which honestly doesn't seem that interesting, but it's just a great show. The characters do so many things throughout the different seasons of the show that take you on different journeys, and it's just amazing. I have a special place. I have never binged a show, maybe with the exception of Game of Thrones. Well, I didn't really binge Game of Thrones like you did, but I binged that show so fast.
Yeah.
I loved it. Hour-long episodes too.
Some of the
Season
best,
2 is fucking awful, but
some of the
regardless.
best TV parents.
100%.
Iconic TV parents. Fantastic. Launched so many careers. I've noted. I think it's hilarious, and that's what's so interesting about our TV conversation. Whereas I was talking about flawless albums, every show, with the exception of how you spoke about 6 Feet Under, I think every show we've mentioned has had that rocky, like you mentioned.
Yeah,
but it's not enough to detract that we think it's. I think that's
season
really
2 also has an excuse. It was during the writer's strike and
right.
this and that. But I mean, season 1 was so good that it sort of. And that's sort of like what I'm hoping with a show like Mr. Robot. Like, hopefully the how great season 1 was, it could sort of carry me through season 2.
Right. It's just such a wholesome show, and
It is.
Normally that might be a reason for me to not care for a show, but
Right.
it just everything about it works, and it's just about like it's coming of age, and it's people trying to find their way, but it's also just people trying to be good. I mean, not everyone in that show is perfect, but.
Right.
I mean, at the end of it, everyone is doing, whether they're doing something bad or sinful, it's like they're doing it because, like, for the sake of a football program. So it's
Right.
like on a global scale, it's just not. It's just a really great show, and it's so well written. And
I found it fascinating that I actually watched this show before I watched a show like 13 Reasons Why, because both are, teen dramas that high school dramas that typically wouldn't interest me. But I remember watching, and I had the same take with 13 Reasons Why, that a lot of people turn. What happened? Kayla just fell. No, I think she stumped her toe. All right, sorry. Kayla fell in the hallway. We had to check on her real quick. Anyways, what I was saying was one of my worries or criticisms when watching, not even criticisms, something that went through my head when I was watching 13 Reasons Why was like, oh, this show is so melodramatic, and people use that term a lot, but guess what? High school people are melodramatic.
high school is such a serious thing.
And, I feel like there's a lot of people who haven't given this show a shot because of what it is. And look, we're not crazy here. This is another show. Go on any website, any list that is critical on TV shows. It's a show that ends up pretty high on its list. It's like what I said. Even though it is a specific thing, network television, teen drama, high school drama, whatever, you got to give credit where credit's due for something that does it the best. And I just think that that's what the show is.
And I agree. So I think a lot of people are afraid because like, I don't care about sports, or I don't want to watch a show about football. One thing you have to understand is that's just one part of it.
Right.
2, sports are a great way to drive a narrative. There's something that's cinematic about real life sports. And that's why something like a 30 for 30, I think 30 for 30s are interesting, even if you don't care about sports.
They win awards all the time.
They're always great. I mean, for audiences.
Okay,
like,
yeah. In general.
People can get into rallying behind
anybody,
an icon
right,
or a team, and because sports work narratively. So
Kayla loved it, and she couldn't give two shits about football.
Yes, it's not. I'm telling you, if you think that, it's not about that. I'm not saying you'll like the show. You might find some other things you don't care about it. But
what's the guy's name that did it? I'm forgetting his name. Showrunner.
He wasn't the showrunner, but Peter Berg, executive producer.
Yeah, obviously direct the X-Men movies. What's your number 2? We're in number 2? Yeah.
I think we're gonna punt.
Okay.
Breaking Bad.
Punt.
What's your number 2?
Lost.
Punt. So now we just talk about Breaking Bad and Lost.
Yeah, essentially. Well, which one do you want to talk about?
It doesn't matter. We can talk about Lost.
Okay. This was, I think you have this take too, but this show was the show that made me realize that TV could truly, truly, truly be something special to a level more fathomable that I could ever understand from another form of like expressive media. Like my doubt of movies came from Lost. The only other thing that I've seen captivate me as much as this are novels and written works. This was a show that I refused to watch when it came on because I thought to myself is what the fuck do I care about people lost on
How long can you stay stranded on an island?
Exactly. The way that I've told you this before, the way I got into Lost, everybody's freaking out about the season finale of season 3. And I decided to tell myself, or I decided to check out the season finale of season 3. I watched it, and by the end of it, I got it. I said, oh, this is about way more than this. And granted, a lot of people are going to be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why did you spoil it? And it probably
This is your Minority Report.
It probably is one of the best episodes of that show.
Oh, yeah.
But nothing could have sold me on that show more than, in fact, Kayla, we talk about binge speed. My God. I mean, this is back when we were having like 20 episode seasons, I think in like season 2. It might not have been that long, but regardless.
Season 1 through 3 are 22 episodes.
She crushed it. It was crazy. She was watching it while she was taking a shower and stuff. She uses the phone while she's in the shower.
Lost. That's different. She gonna get electrocuted one day?
Well, no.
So Lost is it's the TV show that got me into TV.
And to be clear, it is your number 1 and my number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a naysayer just like you. And I had a couple friends of mine say, look, you just have to watch it. I don't give a shit if you're a naysayer or not. This was back in a time when we were renting movies and TV, and
Same.
so when you rented TV, you can only get 1 disc at a time, and Lost only had 4 episodes per disc.
Yep.
And they had a few, I think they had like the first 2 or 3 discs, and we just destroyed them. And
were you working at Blockbuster at the time? No,
not yet.
I was making multiple trips a day.
This was way before that.
I was making multiple trips a day to and from Blockbuster, so much so where I would come in, set one on the counter, pick it up, and just leave. And the guy would just ring me up before I even like walked and picked up the next disc. He just rang me up and knew what was going on.
I blew through those DVDs, and the pilot. I won't go episode by episode. I'll just say that show captured my imagination.
Right.
No other show on my list captured my imagination in the way. I mean, it was obviously funny or just brilliant television, but
I've never rewatched a series more than I've rewatched Lost.
Me too. Well, with the exception of the comedies I mentioned, drama, 100%. So again, talk about my personality and the reason why I'm into the things that I'm into. It's all because of Lost. I mean, you talk about J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof and the people that I follow. The reason why I'm excited for Drew Goddard to do that. It's all because of Lost, and I love seeing the Lost actors pop up in other things because I just hold them in such high regard for giving me so much joy and happiness. It's everything about it. It just, again, the TV, that it showed me the potential and possibility for what television could be, and I loved it until the very end. I mentioned earlier in this podcast how when we're recording this, it's actually the anniversary of the premiere, but also the actual date of the crash of Oceanic 815. I looked on my time hop today. Every single year, I have a post about Lost, and this might actually be the first year that I didn't post about it because it's after midnight. We still have
a few hours. So.
It's after midnight.
It is? Oh, yeah, it is. You're right. Sorry.
But anyway, it's just... I could do a whole podcast on Lost, and I don't want to exhaust myself.
We're going to do one. So much like I was talking about with the Ben Howard album, this is actually a show where I thought to myself, I didn't know, nor could I fathom how someone could be this creative, like to come up with this sort of elaborate storyline. I mean, this was something. I mean, half of the fun, sorry, there's yelling going on outside. Half of the fun of watching the show is just uncovering it. The water cooler talk. In fact, I would go so far to say as the state of even just like discussion, pop culture discussion might not have ever happened if it wasn't for a show like Lost, because that's all people would talk about in between episodes. Like
Yeah.
it is an argument for weekly television. I mean, just the show was supported on the back of the hype after, but in between every single episode that would come up, in between every single season. I mean, the fandom was just on another level.
I think one of my favorite things about the show is that there have been various reports, and I think that depending on the details, they had a Bible.
Right.
Damon and Carlton had a Bible as far as like what the show was going to be, but if you want to, if we could just sit down and talk to them about the specifics, like how much did you know about the finale from the start, they would say virtually nothing, other than like they ultimately wanted it to be a fight between good and evil and that kind of stuff. All of that varies.
No spoilers, by the way.
I don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
What I love is that it feels like so much of what goes on in the show on a weekly basis all became happy accidents.
Right.
And I think that makes the show become even more and more impressive.
Well, you set yourself up for success. And I mean, it's okay to stumble into things like that if you're well prepared and you're telling good stories anyways. Right. I mean, look, a lot of people are going to hear this, I'm sure, and like roll their eyes because of the finale. All I have to say about that, and I've said it before, but just because you didn't like how something ended up, it doesn't change your experience of watching the show. And I knew so many people who were as like die hard into the show as I was, who all of a sudden, and even today, just like throw it away because they didn't enjoy the finale. And you can think whatever you want about it. I have no problem if somebody does or doesn't like it. I was fine with it. You know, did I have my issues? 100% I did, but it doesn't change the fact that the experience, and we've talked about, that's been a theme throughout this whole episode, the experience of watching this, I've never had for another TV show. I mean, it's not my number one, but that's just for a whole separate set of circumstances. The experience of watching Lost is and forever will be the golden highest standard of something of pop culture entertainment fandom that I enjoy so much about.
Definitely. I mean, it was the reason, like, I had multiple parties.
Right.
Viewing parties. I attended Matt Wilson's finale party. Like, it was just a communal thing to watch that show. And
it kind of became like sports after a while. Like it became to the point where like I didn't like talking to people about it because everybody was so diehard on what they thought. I was just like, I don't want to talk to you about this anymore.
I agree 100% with what you said about the finale. I genuinely don't think it's a bad finale. I think season 6 is the worst season, but or maybe my least favorite, but I don't see why people hate on the finale so much. But anyway, that's another discussion.
Yeah, for sure. Getting into my
What's that smell?
Something's burning.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's just food. Unless one of the dogs are on fire. But anyways, it's okay. I kind of want a Shiba Inu. Unless it's Dolly, because she's the better of the two. Anyways, my number one, your number two, Breaking Bad. Some debate just in general. It goes back and forth between, I think, this and The Wire as what people consider as like critically one of the best shows of all time.
Or Sopranos.
Or Sopranos is also in that discussion as well. My sole reasoning for putting this as number one is for mainly 3 reasons. I think Walter White is one of the greatest characters ever written in fiction. I think Jesse Pinkman is also one of the greatest characters ever written in fiction, and them together is just
lightning in a bottle.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Then you throw together the fact that the way the show was executed from start to finish. This is, to me personally, yeah, there's seasons that might not be as good as the others, but I don't think the show ever had a bad season. Like, I legitimately think that this thing was executed flawlessly. And TV shows, right, wrong, or indifferent, a lot of people have the perspective of a finale can make or break how you feel overall about a TV show. I don't agree with that, but whatever. I can't think of a way you could more perfectly end a TV show. It was so satisfying and so rewarding. And there are times in this show, we talk about pulling on your heartstrings, man. I mean, there are just things that you see coming for years of watching this show. And when you finally see it, it's still just as much of a knife in the gut as it was the first time that you could even fathom it happening. And it's such an original story. It's a story that doesn't have science fiction. It doesn't really have anything fantastical about it. A lot of it is like almost Christopher Nolan-esque, where it's so grounded in reality. You could easily see this happening in any community to anybody you know. And it creates a villain that you both hate and root for at the exact same time. And you end up questioning your own morality, man. And it's also a beautifully shot show, beautifully edited show. I mean, it's amazing. It's an amazing show.
I agree. There's not a bad season.
Yeah.
I've only seen it through once.
Okay.
Because not for any particular reason other than I think I like the idea of waiting a while to watch it again.
100%.
To my recollection, there's not a bad episode. I think it is easily the most perfect thing
right
ever. And for the record, I think this is the better show.
Oh, 100%.
When it comes to Lost.
I
Lost
completely get why you say that. I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, your reasoning for Lost being number one is almost purely down to experience.
It's favoritism, experience. Yeah. I think Breaking Bad is one of the most perfect things I've ever seen, period.
Right.
And again, kind of talking about the criticism of Lost, where people are like, oh, they just made it up the whole time. For one, that's television.
Yeah.
And two, Breaking Bad, the way that it was all a happy accident, Breaking Bad wasn't planned either.
No. Jesse Pinkman was supposed to die in the first season.
It's amazing that Vince Gilligan didn't know what season 5 was going to be until season 5 came up.
They also were going to end the show in 2 different parts. This has been sort of debated, and I let me rephrase this. There is a debate that the show the final season was actually not planned at all, like it wasn't supposed to happen, and 2, that the show, the original ending of the show was actually supposed to be the penultimate episode of the season.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I agree that it's the most satisfying. I remember watching those, like, starting with Ozymandias and those final 3 episodes. I remember feeling like every time a Horcrux was destroyed and Voldemort could feel it in his gut, like a part of him died.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like for 3 weeks in a row. It's like another Horcrux just died. I'm in pain, and I'm slowly I have no purpose after. And that's what it felt like. I mean, that was also event television, particularly at the end. But I mean, that was the show that everybody watched.
Yeah.
Everybody fucking watched that show. And it was also, from what I remember when the show came out. I remember the promotional material.
Right.
And because this is a stupid story, but a phrase that my dad used to use commonly as a joke, he would use the term break bad. Like, I'm going to break bad on this fool. Like, he used to say that. And so I remember when the show came out and I just saw the guy in his underwear in the desert. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I remember being like, we should watch the show, because I thought it was funny that it was called Breaking Bad. And it wasn't until a couple years later where I realized, that show I was talking about ended up being one of the best shows ever created. It's funny because it reminds me of what Mr. Robot was. I mean, when that came out, AMC, the channel 100%. That plays those old movies.
Yeah.
It was sort of Mr. Robot before Mr. Robot. How it was just unsuspecting. Who's this cast, and it just became its own animal, and just killed it.
I feel like as time goes on, there's more and more apprehension for people to watch the show who have never seen it, even as glowing as it's given praise. talked to a lot of people in the last handful of years that just have a hard time getting into it. And I think that is, and I get it. I legitimately do. On paper, it doesn't seem that interesting. And we talked about this with The Deuce. Like, at the end of the day, it is a show about people just doing some things. And all I have to say about that is, I promise you, if you just stick out whatever preconceived notions you might have about the worry of what you think the show's about, you will be rewarded immensely with such a fantastic, just a fantastic experience. The last thing I really have to say about it is, just looking back on it in retrospect too, I've seen this show through 3 times, and I've also given the shortest amount of time to do that. Like, for Lost, there was a few gaps. The first time I ever rewatched Lost from beginning to end, it was sort of I sort of cheated, because for the last season, I don't do this that often. Actually, before the last season came out, I rewatched all of the show in sequence. But with this show, the first time I rewatched it, I was on the edge of my seat as if I had never seen it before. And the third time I watched it, it was the same experience. And that's crazy to me. It's absolutely baffling.
It's just the best acting. Some of the best acting I've
God.
ever seen on screen. The way that Albuquerque sort of breathes life into the show,
It's
and
a character.
That's what makes it so unique as well. There's a lot. I mean, one of the best all-time TV villains with Giancarlo Esposito. And 2 iconic characters that caused a spinoff, Better Call Saul and Mike, and there's just there's a lot that there's just so much that we could go on and on about.
It's sort of become also like a modern day version, I feel like, of Scarface. It's like this iconic crime story and crime boss that people just hold in this high regard.
It also just, it makes me right now, like, knowing that this show exists, it makes me wonder when TV will ever be that good again. Like, what else is there? Like, every time a show comes out, I enjoy it.
Right.
I can enjoy shows. It didn't ruin TV for me. If anything, Breaking Bad breathed new life into television, I think. But because people were like, holy fuck, you can do this. But at the same time, I know in the back of my mind that I don't know when I will ever see a show that good again.
It's interesting that we're talking about this last, just because I honestly can't say this about anything else that we've talked about, even the number ones on all of our lists, but it's just done so flawlessly that it's hard for me to even fathom like something being executed in a better way than this.
Yeah.
It's like God made this show.
at the start, I talked about sort of my self-consciousness when it came to this kind of thing, because like sometimes if I'm quick on the trigger and say, oh, this thing that came out last year is the best thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Sometimes, it's valid to say, give it some. I think you need more time with this, some time to reevaluate, and maybe Breaking Bad, of everything that we've talked about here today, is the thing that I'm least self-conscious about. It's like, yes, the greatest TV show of all time came out in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Yes, it came out just a few years ago. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think the best thing walking away from this is everybody has a lot of stuff to check out if they've never heard of. I mean, shit, even if you haven't heard of one thing from each of our lists, like, you've got a lot of stuff to occupy your time.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome. But we've done a long time. This is a long episode. But
this is
fun.
the longest episode we've ever done.
Yeah. Are you feeling it?
Yeah, I'm very tired.
I am too. It's taking it out of me.
I thought this energy drink was going to work, but
we've been recording for 3 hours, so it's going to wear off at some point. All right, we're going to get the hell out of here. Find me on social media at Jaye Williams, J the Y to the E on Twitter and Instagram. Same for both. Find the show at Sight Sound Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Join the Facebook group, sightsoundpod.com. Get your t-shirt. Where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at WhatUpSnell. Please check out my latest movies episode. Our buddy Kristen Smith was on. We talked about some movie trailers and we reviewed Wind River. And I had such a blast doing that episode because I haven't done, not since Film Beef had I really examined a movie and been able to talk about it in that way. And so it was just a really fun episode. So I enjoyed it. And go check it out. If you haven't seen Wind River, it doesn't matter. It's a non-spoiler review. So
yeah, and we're doing Mr. Robot recaps coming up soon. Make sure if you haven't done so and you are interested in checking out those recaps, go ahead and catch up on Mr. Robot. Don't know when those episodes are going to come out, but we'll figure all that out later. But look out for it. You got anything else?
Nope.
All right. We're going to see you guys later on the next one. Goodbye.